I woke up at 7 on Easter morning in Denver to my mother's voice on the phone telling me dinner was canceled. No apology, no explanation. Just a cold statement like she was reading a weather report. I said okay, and stood in my kitchen feeling the world shift 3 inches off its axis. 3 hours later, she butt-dialed me from the table, and I heard the clinking of silver against china while she lied to everyone about why I wasn't there. My name is Allison Hall. I am 34 years old, living in a quiet apartment in Denver, Colorado, where the morning light hits the granite countertops with a brightness that usually makes me feel capable and organized. But on this particular Sunday, that light felt harsh, exposing a sudden, gaping hollow in my chest. It started at 7 in the morning. I was already awake, brewing coffee, anticipating the usual schedule. In previous years, by 7, I would have been at my parents' house, or at least on the road driving there, the trunk of my car loaded with side dishes I had spent Saturday preparing. But this year, plans had been vague. I had been waiting for the final confirmation of time, assuming it would be the standard 2 in the afternoon early dinner. My phone buzzed against the countertop. The screen lit up with the word Mom. I swiped it open, ready to say Happy Easter, and ask if she needed me to pick up extra ice or wine. Allison, she said. There was no holiday greeting, no warmth. Her voice was flat, stripped of the usual maternal lilt she used when she wanted something or when she was performing for an audience. It sounded like she was reading a grocery list she had lost interest in. Hey, Mom, I said, leaning my hip against the counter, clutching my warm mug. Happy Easter. What time do you want me over? We are not doing Easter dinner this year, she said. The sentence hung there, suspended in the static between us. It was so abrupt, so final, that my brain could not immediately process it. It felt like walking into a glass door you thought was open. Oh, I said. My voice sounded small in my own kitchen. Is everything okay? Is Dad sick? No, everyone is fine, she replied, and I could hear her moving things around in the background, the distinct clatter of a plate being set down. It is just too much work. We decided to skip it. I have to go. Allison, I am busy. And then the line went dead. I stared at the phone. The call duration read less than 40 seconds. I said okay to the empty room, a mechanical reflex for a conversation that was already over. I stood frozen in the center of my kitchen, the smell of fresh coffee suddenly turning acidic in my stomach. There is a specific physical sensation when you feel the axis of your world tilt. It is not pain, exactly. It is vertigo. It is the sudden inability to trust the floor beneath your feet. I put the phone down and tried to make sense of it. We decided to skip it. My family did not skip holidays. My mother, Marlene, did not skip opportunities to host. Easter was her production. It was the day she broke out the pastel tablecloths and the expensive ham, and forced us all to take a photo on the front porch for her Facebook feed. For 34 years, Easter had been a non-negotiable obligation. I started the mental gymnastics that every neglected child knows by heart. I began to rationalize the hurt away. Maybe she is just tired, I told myself, pacing the length of my living room. She is getting older. Hosting is exhausting. Maybe she and Dad just wanted a quiet day. I looked at the clock. 7:10 in the morning, if they were canceling. Why wait until now? Why wait until the morning of? Maybe something happened. I thought, my anxiety spiking. Maybe Tessa's kids are sick. Maybe Bryce had a crisis. But she had said everyone was fine. I sat down on my beige sofa, the silence of the apartment pressing in on me. Usually, on Easter, there is noise. There is the stress of getting dressed, the rush of traffic, the loud greetings, the chaotic energy of my sister Tessa taking over the room, the low hum of my brother Bryce talking about his latest business venture. Today, there was just the hum of the refrigerator. I spent the next 3 hours trying to be a rational adult. I told myself I was overreacting. I told myself that a canceled dinner was a gift. I had a free day. I could read. I could go for a hike. I could catch up on work for Rivergate Data Solutions. I tried to frame it as a relief. Look at all this free time. I thought, I do not have to deal with the family drama. I do not have to answer questions about why I am still single, or why I have not bought a house in the suburbs yet. But the knot in my stomach would not loosen. It felt tight, heavy, like a stone swallowed whole. I checked my phone every 10 minutes. I checked the family group chat. Silence. No one had posted anything. No happy Easter gifts from my aunts. No pictures of the kids hunting for eggs from Tessa. It was eerily quiet. At 10 in the morning, I decided to make myself breakfast. Just toast and eggs. Sad. Solitary Easter eggs. I was standing over the stove, watching the butter melt in the pan. When my phone started to buzz on the counter again, I looked over. Mom calling. Relief washed over me so continually it almost made my knees buckle. See? I thought, it was a mistake. She felt bad. Or maybe she changed her mind. Maybe they ordered pizza and want me to come over for a casual hang. I wiped my hands on a towel and picked up the phone. I took a breath, composing my voice to sound casual, not hurt. I did not want to be the dramatic one. I wanted to be easy Allison, the one who rolls with the punches. Hey, Mom, I answered, injecting a little lightness into my tone. Hello? Silence. Mom? I said again. There was no answer, but the line was open. I could hear the digital hiss of a connection, and then I heard the rustle of fabric. Harsh, scratching sounds against a microphone. She had butt-dialed me. I sighed. About to hang up. It happens. She probably put the phone in her pocket or her purse without locking the screen. I pulled the phone away from my ear, my thumb hovering over the red end call button. But then, the rustling stopped, and the audio cleared. It was not silence. It was a symphony of noise. The first thing I heard was the clinking of silverware against china. It is a distinct sound, sharp, rhythmic, unmistakable. It is the sound of a meal in progress. Then, I heard a laugh. It was a high, tinkling laugh that I recognized instantly. Tessa, my sister. My thumb froze over the button. I brought the phone back to my ear, pressing it hard against my head, my other hand gripping the edge of the kitchen counter so tightly my knuckles turned white. Evan, pass the rolls. Please, a male voice said. That was Bryce, my brother. His voice was relaxed, full, confident. Did you see the way the neighbor looked at the wreath? My mother's voice cut through the background noise. She sounded close to the phone, but not speaking into it. The phone must have been sitting on the table, face up, or perhaps in a pocket of a cardigan draped over her chair. Her voice was clear. She sounded happy. She sounded like the hostess in her element. I stopped breathing. They were eating. They were all there. I could hear the specific, chaotic texture of a family dinner. I heard the scrape of a chair being pushed back. I heard the murmur of Tessa's husband, Evan, talking to one of their children. I heard the heavy thud of a serving dish being set down on the table. We are not doing Easter dinner this year. The lie echoed in my head, colliding with the reality pouring out of the tiny speaker. Let us say grace, my father's voice boomed. The table went quiet. I stood in my silent apartment in Denver, listening to my father in Cincinnati perform his prayer. It was his company voice, deep, resonant, full of performative humility. Lord, we thank you for this bounty, Greg Hall intoned. We thank you for the hands that prepared it. We thank you for gathering this family together in health and happiness. We ask for your blessings on Tessa and Evan and the little ones, and on Bryce in his ventures. Bless this home and keep us in your light. Amen. Amen, the table chorused. He had not mentioned me. In the roll call of blessings, I had been omitted. Just like I had been omitted from the table. The sounds of eating resumed, the clink of forks, the passing of dishes. This ham is incredible, Mom, Tessa said. Seriously, better than last year. It is the glaze, my mother replied, preening. I used extra brown sugar and a little mustard. I felt the tears prick my eyes. Hot and sudden, I blinked them back. I did not want to cry. I wanted to understand. Why? Why lie? If they didn't want me there, Why not just say it? Why the elaborate charade of canceling? And then, the question came. It was Evan, my brother-in-law. He was always a bit oblivious, a man who stumbled into conversations without reading the room. "So," Evan said, his voice slightly muffled as if he was chewing. "Allison said she wasn't coming?" My heart stopped. The world narrowed down to the speaker of my phone. I held my breath, desperate to hear the answer, terrified of what it would be. There was a pause, a beat of silence where the only sound was the scrape of a knife on a plate. "Yeah," my mother said. Her voice was breezy, casual, completely unbothered. "She is busy. You know Allison. She works so much. She said she just wanted to be alone this year. She needed some space." I gasped. The sound escaped my lips before I could stop it. A sharp intake of air that sounded loud in my empty kitchen. She wanted to be alone. It was a lie so perfect, so insidious, because it used my own nature against me. I was the quiet one, the independent one, the one who didn't make a fuss. She had taken my personality and twisted it into an excuse for my exclusion. "That is a shame," Evan said. "We miss her." "She is fine," my father grunted. "She likes her solitude. Pass the gravy. Bryce?" "She is probably working on some big project," Bryce added, dismissive. "She never knows when to clock out." "Well, her loss," Tessa laughed. "More potatoes for us." I stood there, listening to them discuss my absence as if I were a distant acquaintance. A character in a book they had read a long time ago. They were not worried about me. They were not sad I wasn't there. They were relieved. They had successfully amputated me from the holiday, and the wound had already healed over. I should have hung up. I should have ended the call right then to spare myself the indignity of eavesdropping on my own erasure. But I couldn't. I was paralyzed by a morbid fascination. I needed to know the extent of it. I needed to know if anyone at all, would push back. I waited. I listened to them talk about the weather. I listened to them talk about the neighbors. I listened to Tessa brag about her daughter's dance recital. No one asked about me again. The topic of Allison was closed. I was a checked box. Allison. Not attending. Then, the final blow came. The moment that solidified everything. "Marlene, this table looks beautiful," a voice said. It was an aunt. Aunt Kathy? Maybe. I hadn't even realized she was there. It wasn't just the immediate family. It was extended family, too. "Oh, thank you," my mother cooed. I was worried it would feel empty with one less setting, but it actually worked out better. We have more room for the platters. It actually worked out better. I felt a coldness spread through my chest, originating from my heart and moving out to my fingertips. It was the temperature of absolute clarity. They hadn't canceled Easter because they were tired. They hadn't canceled it because of a crisis. They hadn't even canceled it because they were mad at me. They had excluded me because I was inconvenient, because without me, the table wasn't crowded. Without me, the dynamic was smoother. Without me, they were the perfect, photogenic family they always wanted to be. I was the clutter they had cleared away to make room for the platters. "Can someone pass the roasted potatoes?" my mother asked. "Be careful. The dish is hot." "I got it," Bryce said. I looked at the phone in my hand. The timer read 4 minutes and 12 seconds. I didn't say a word. I didn't scream into the receiver. I didn't announce my presence and demand an explanation. I didn't give them the satisfaction of hearing my voice crack. I simply pressed the red button. The line disconnected. The kitchen was silent again, but the quality of the silence had changed. Before. It was the silence of waiting. Now, it was the silence of a tomb. I put the phone down on the counter. My hand was trembling. A fine, high-frequency tremor that shook my entire arm. I looked at the eggs in the pan. They were cold now. The yolks congealed and rubbery. I scraped them into the trash without a second thought. I walked over to the calendar on my refrigerator. It was a magnetic one, with dry erase markers. Today's date, Easter Sunday, was blank. I had not written anything down because I had been waiting for instructions. I picked up the black marker. My hand hovered over the square. I didn't write family dinner. I didn't write Easter. I wrote 10 a.m., the call. Then I wrote, Mom. She wanted to be alone. I capped the marker. The snap of the cap sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. They thought I was busy. They thought I was working. They thought I was safe in my apartment. None the wiser, playing the role of the distant, workaholic daughter they had cast me in. They thought that being forgotten was the same thing as being invisible. I walked to the window and looked out at the Denver skyline. The mountains were in the distance, jagged and permanent. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the air of my empty apartment. They wanted me to be alone? Fine, I would be alone, but I would not be invisible. I went back to the counter, picked up my phone, and opened the call log. I took a screenshot of the incoming call from Mom. Duration, 4:12. Then I opened my Notes app. I created a new folder. I typed the title, Evidence. I was not going to make a scene. I was not going to call them back and cry. I was not going to beg for a seat at a table that had been deliberately set without me. I was just going to remember. I saved the note and locked my phone. The screen went black, reflecting my face. I didn't look like a victim. I looked like someone who had just woken up. They had served a lie with their glazed ham. But they had forgotten one thing. I have an excellent memory, and I was no longer hungry for their scraps. To understand why I stood frozen in my kitchen, listening to a butt-dialed conversation instead of hanging up like a normal, well-adjusted person, you have to understand the specific ecosystem of the Hall family in Cincinnati, Ohio. We are not a family of screamers or plate throwers. We are a family of image consultants. My parents, Greg and Marlene, have spent 40 years curating a life that looks immaculate on a Christmas card. They are the kind of people who have a dedicated seasonal flag for their front porch and who believe that if you do not post about an event on social media. It did not legally happen. I grew up as the middle piece of a very specific puzzle. First, there is Tessa. She is 3 years older than me, and she is the sun around which my parents' world orbits. Tessa is loud, sharp, and lives her life as if she is being filmed for a reality show about chaotic but lovable suburban moms. She is a walking Pinterest board. The kind of woman who organizes her pantry with hand-lettered labels and dresses her children in 50 shades of beige linen. She has a husband, Evan, who is perfectly nice and perfectly bland, and 2 adorable children who serve as the primary content for the family group chat. Tessa is high maintenance, but in the Hall family, requiring maintenance is interpreted as being high value. Her crises are treated as family emergencies. Her triumphs are national holidays. Then there is Bryce. He is 4 years younger than me, the baby, and the undisputed golden boy. Bryce works as an insurance broker but talks about it like he is running a hedge fund. He is obsessed with self-improvement and hustle culture. He wakes up at 4 in the morning to do ice baths and posts inspirational quotes about grinding while everyone else is sleeping. My parents look at Bryce and see a titan of industry. They hang on his every word about crypto markets and term life policies as if he is delivering a sermon from the Mount. And then there is me, Allison. My role in the family was established before I even finished elementary school. I was the easy one. I was the baby who slept through the night. I was the teenager who never missed curfew. I was the college student who did not need bail money or a sudden transfer of funds for a textbook emergency. I built my identity around being low impact. I prided myself on it. I thought it was a virtue. I thought that by demanding nothing, I was giving them everything. I was the frictionless daughter. If Tessa was the hurricane and Bryce was the earthquake, I was the climate-controlled room. I work as a cybersecurity analyst for a company called Rivergate Data Solutions. It is a good job. It is stable, high-paying, and intellectually demanding. I spend my days tracking digital footprints and securing networks against invisible threats. But to my parents, my career is a vague black hole because I cannot explain it in a single, punchy sentence at a cocktail party. They treat it as a hobby. When people ask what I do, my mother usually waves her hand and says, "Oh, Allison does something with computers. very technical, but did you hear that Bryce just won the regional sales trophy? For years. I told myself this dynamic was fine. I told myself that being independent was its own reward. Easter used to be the high holy day of this dynamic. In the past, the Hall Easter production was a military operation commanded by my mother. It involved a brunch for the church group, a massive dinner for the family, and an egg hunt that had to be staged perfectly for the photos. For the last decade, my role in this production was that of the uncredited stagehand. I would fly in from Denver or drive up if I was nearby, usually arriving a day early. I was the one who peeled 5 pounds of potatoes while standing at the sink. I was the one who ironed the tablecloths because Tessa was too stressed dealing with the kids. I was the one who ran to the grocery store at 7 in the morning because Mom forgot the heavy cream. I remember one Easter clearly from 3 years ago. I was in the kitchen, sweating, basting a ham, while the rest of the family sat on the patio drinking mimosas. Through the window, I could hear them laughing. I could see my father toasting Bryce's new car. I could see my mother holding Tessa's hand, admiring her manicure. When I finally brought the food out, my mother clapped her hands and said, "Oh, look at this spread. I have been slaving away all morning." I didn't correct her. I just smiled and took my seat at the corner of the table. The spot where the table leg interfered with your knees, I thought that was love. I thought love was eating the burnt roll so someone else could have the soft one. I thought love was making yourself small, so there was more room for everyone else's oversized personalities. But looking back, the signs of my erasure were already there. They were small, subtle things, like cracks in a windshield that you ignore until the whole thing shatters. It started with the communication delay. I would call my mother on a Tuesday, and she wouldn't answer. No big deal. But then she wouldn't call back on Wednesday or Thursday. When I finally got her on the phone on Sunday, she would sound breathless and hurried. "Oh, Allison, it has been a madhouse," she would say, before launching into a 20-minute monologue about Tessa's basement renovation. She would never ask how I was. She would never ask about Denver. And before I could offer an update, she would say, "Well, I have to run. Dad is calling me." Then there were the group chats. We had a family chat named Hall Family Hive. For years, it was active, but about 6 months ago, I noticed it had gone quiet. I assumed everyone was just busy. I assumed life had slowed down. Then, I was scrolling through Facebook one evening after work, eating takeout on my couch, and I saw a photo posted by my cousin. It was a picture of my parents, Tessa, Bryce, and their significant others at a barbecue. The caption read, "Impromptu Sunday Fun Day with the Halls." I zoomed in on the photo. It wasn't just a barbecue. There was a banner in the background. It was a celebration for my father's retirement, something I knew was coming up, but I had not been given a date for. I felt a cold prickle of shame, the kind that makes your face burn even when you are alone. I texted the family chat. "Looks fun. Didn't know Dad retired this weekend. Congrats." The response was silence for 4 hours. Finally, Bryce replied, "Oh yeah, it was super last minute. Didn't want to make you travel all the way from Denver for just a hot dog." I accepted that. I swallowed it down like a pill that was too dry. Of course, I thought, they are being considerate. They know flights are expensive. They are saving me the trouble. I was the queen of rationalization. I could spin any exclusion into an act of kindness. They didn't invite me because they respect my time. They didn't call because they know I am busy with work. They forgot my birthday until the day after because they are just so overwhelmed with the grandkids. I convinced myself that I was the cool daughter, the low-maintenance one, the one who didn't need constant validation. I wore my neglect like a badge of honor. I told myself that my independence made me strong, but the truth is, there is a very thin line between being low maintenance and being of no value. If you never ask for anything, people eventually assume you need nothing. And if you need nothing, you become nothing. You become furniture. You are the lamp in the corner of the room, expected to work when clicked on, ignored when not needed, and absolutely never thanked for the light. When I moved to Denver 3 years ago for the job at Rivergate, I thought the distance would make the heart grow fonder. I thought my absence would create a void that they would feel. I imagined them at Sunday dinner, looking at my empty chair and saying, "I wish Allison were here. It is just not the same without her dry wit and her potato salad." Instead, the water just filled in the hole I left behind. The surface smoothed over instantly. Tessa took up more space. Bryce got louder. My parents just adjusted the camera angle of their lives so that the frame didn't show the empty spot where I used to stand. That morning, when my mother called to cancel Easter, the old programming kicked in instantly. "We are not doing Easter dinner this year." My brain, trained by decades of being the easy one, immediately went to work protecting them. I constructed a dozen scenarios in seconds. Mom is getting older. Maybe her arthritis is flaring up. Dad has been stressed about the stock market. Tessa's kids probably have the flu. I stood in my kitchen, prepared to be the good soldier. I was ready to send a "thinking of you all" text. I was ready to send a digital gift card for a nice dinner delivery so Mom wouldn't have to cook. I was ready to be gracious. But then came the butt dial. 3 hours later. That open line was a portal into a reality I had been denying for years. Listening to them, I realized that the issue was not that they were busy. The issue was not that they were chaotic. The issue was that they were actively managing me. When my mother told Evan, "She is busy," she wanted to be alone. She wasn't just lying. She was rewriting my character. She was painting me as the distant, cold, career-obsessed hermit so that she didn't have to feel guilty about excluding me. She was absolving herself of the sin of favoritism by framing it as my choice. And the worst part? The others accepted it instantly. Bryce's dismissive comment, "She never knows when to clock out," stung more than the lie itself. It showed how little he knew me. I have not worked a weekend in 2 years. I spend my weekends hiking, reading, and occasionally staring at my phone waiting for a family update that never comes. But to him, I was just a two-dimensional figure, a cautionary tale of all work and no life that he could use to prop up his own narrative of balanced hustle. I stood there, gripping the cold granite of my countertop, and the realization washed over me not with sadness, but with a terrifying clarity. I had spent my entire life trying to be the good daughter. I thought that if I was easy enough, quiet enough, and helpful enough, I would earn my place at the table. I thought my lack of demands was my ticket to belonging. I was wrong, in the Hall family, and perhaps in the world. You do not get points for being easy. You get taken for granted. If you make yourself a doormat, people will not walk around you out of respect. They will wipe their feet on you and complain if you are not flat enough. The butt dial didn't just reveal a secret dinner. It revealed my status. I wasn't a member of the family. I was an optional subscription they had decided to cancel because they weren't using it enough. I looked at the call timer ticking upward. I heard the clink of the fork hitting the plate. I heard my mother laugh at a joke I wasn't there to hear. The easy Allison died in that kitchen. Somewhere between the 3rd and 4th minute of the call, she didn't die screaming. She just quietly expired, replaced by someone who was done making excuses for people who clearly didn't make space for her. I was not going to be the furniture anymore. I was about to become the remodel they never asked for. The phone sat on the granite island, screen dark, looking like an innocent piece of glass and metal rather than the grenade that had just detonated my reality. I stood there for a long time, my hands gripping the edge of the counter until my knuckles turned the color of old bone. The silence in my apartment was no longer peaceful. It was heavy, pressurized, ringing with the phantom echoes of silverware clinking and the sound of my mother's voice casually erasing me from existence. She wanted to be alone. I unlocked the phone again, my fingers trembling so badly I mistyped my passcode twice. I needed to see the call log. I needed visual confirmation that I had not just hallucinated 4 minutes and 12 seconds of betrayal. There it was. Incoming call. Mom. 10:04. AM. 4 minutes. 12 seconds. It was real. A desperate, pathetic part of my brain, the part that was still 5 years old and wanting to be picked up, tried to bargain with the data. Maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe they were at a restaurant? No. I heard the dog barking. Maybe it was a surprise party they were planning for me? No. I was in Denver. They were in Cincinnati. I opened the voicemail app. I needed to hear the first lie again. I needed to compare the sonic textures of the two calls. I pressed play on the message from 7 a.m. "Allison," my mother's voice played out, tinny and sharp. "We are not doing Easter dinner this year. It is just too much work. We decided to skip it. I have to go. Allison, I am busy." I listened to it 3 times. The first time I heard it that morning, I had heard fatigue. I had heard a woman overwhelmed by the prospect of cooking for 10 people. I had heard a plea for understanding. Now, listening to it after the butt dial, I heard something completely different. I heard a script. I heard the clipped, efficient tone of someone checking a task off a list. It was not the voice of a mother disappointed that she wouldn't see her daughter. It was the voice of a project manager canceling a meeting she never wanted to attend in the first place. We decided to skip it. They had not decided to skip it. They had decided to skip me. I walked over to the trash can and looked at the raw eggs I had thrown away. I felt a sudden, violent urge to retrieve them and throw them against the wall, just to make a mess that matched the one inside my head. But I didn't. I am Allison Hall. I don't make messes. I clean them up. Instead, I went to my living room and sat on the couch. I decided to wait. If this was a misunderstanding, surely someone would text. Surely, if they really missed me, there would be a follow-up. At 2 p.m. My phone pinged. My heart hammered against my ribs. I snatched the phone up. It was a text from Tessa. "Hope you had a relaxing day." I stared at the screen. The yellow heart emoji pulsed with a cheerful, toxic brightness. It was the perfect text. It was the kind of text you could show to a jury to prove you were a loving sister. Look, I checked on her. I sent a heart. But the wording was surgical. "Hope you had a relaxing day." She didn't ask what I did. She didn't ask why I wasn't there. She didn't mention their dinner. She was reinforcing the narrative my mother had spun at the table. If I was having a relaxing day, then I had chosen this. I was the one resting. I was the one who needed space. Her text was not an inquiry. It was a stamp of approval on the lie. I typed out a response. "I heard you guys eating." My thumb hovered over the send arrow. I could blow it all up right now. I could send that text and watch the chaos unfold. I could imagine Tessa's face, pale and panicked, showing the phone to Mom. I could imagine the frantic backpedaling, but then I thought about the voice I heard on the phone. She wanted to be alone. If I confronted them now, they would make it my fault. They would say I was eavesdropping. They would say I was being dramatic. They would say, "Oh, we just didn't want you to feel obligated to travel. Why do you always twist things?" I deleted the text. I didn't reply to Tessa. I didn't heart the message. I put the phone face down. I decided to conduct an experiment. I called it the silence. For my entire adult life, I had been the connective tissue of the Hall family. I was the one who initiated the calls. I was the one who sent the "thinking of you" links. I was the one who smoothed over the awkward silences. I stopped. I decided I would not reach out to a single person until they reached out to me. I wanted to see how long it would take for the structure of our relationship to collapse without my constant maintenance. Sunday passed. No one else called. Monday passed. Silence. Tuesday passed. Silence. By Wednesday, the silence in my apartment felt physical. It was a cold draft that seeped into my bones. I realized, with a sinking horror, that my family did not miss me. They did not notice my absence because, in their minds, I was already absent. I was a background process that they only interacted with when they needed troubleshooting. On Thursday night, I opened my laptop. I am a cybersecurity analyst. When I encounter a breach at Rivergate, I don't cry about it. I document it. I track the intrusion. I build a case. I opened a new document. I named it Timeline of Events. I started typing. April 20th, 2025. 700 hours. Call from Marlene Hall. Claim. Easter canceled due to fatigue. Actual status. False. April 20th, 2025. 1000 hours. Call from Marlene Hall. Unintentional. Audio evidence confirms gathering of full extended family. Direct quote. She wanted to be alone. Speaker, Marlene Hall. Witnesses, Greg Hall, Tessa Hall, Bryce Hall, Evan Miller. April 20th, 2025, 1400 hours. Text from Tessa Miller. Content. Hope you had a relaxing day. Assessment. Attempt to validate false narrative. I typed until my fingers hurt. I wrote down every slight I had ignored for the past 5 years. The forgotten birthdays. The time they went to Disney World and told me it was just a last-minute thing for the grandkids, even though I saw the matching shirts they had ordered weeks in advance. The way they only called me when they needed tech support or advice on a contract. I was building a dossier. I didn't know what I was going to use it for yet. Maybe just for my own sanity. Maybe to prove to myself that I wasn't crazy. 1 week later, on the following Sunday, my phone rang. It was Mom. I looked at the ID, Mom. Usually, when she called, I would lunge for the phone. I would be eager to please, eager to hear her voice, eager to be included. This time, I sat on the couch and watched it ring. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings. A wave of nausea rolled over me. It was guilt, pure, conditioned guilt. The programming ran deep. Pick up, be a good daughter, don't make her wait. My hand twitched toward the phone. She lied to you, a voice in my head whispered. She sat at a table with a glazed ham and told everyone you didn't want to be there. I pulled my hand back. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. I sat there, breathing hard, as if I had just run a sprint. The silence returned, but this time, the silence felt different. It didn't feel empty. It felt protective. She didn't leave a voicemail. 10 minutes later, she sent a text. Just checking in. Beautiful weather here. Hope you are good. Nothing about Easter. Nothing about why we hadn't spoken in a week. Just a generic weather report. She was sweeping the holiday under the rug, assuming I was still tucked underneath it, quiet and compliant. I didn't reply. The days turned into weeks. The experiment continued. I went to work. I went to the gym. I bought groceries. My life looked exactly the same from the outside. But internally, the landscape was being raised. I was grieving. I was grieving the family I thought I had. I was grieving the version of myself that had believed in them. 30 days after Easter, the dam finally broke. I was in the middle of a work meeting, reviewing a security protocol for a client, when my phone started buzzing incessantly. It was Bryce. I rejected the call. I was working. He called again immediately. I excused myself from the meeting and stepped into the hallway. Bryce never called twice unless someone was dead or he needed money. "Hello?" I answered, keeping my voice neutral. "Finally," Bryce snapped. He didn't say hello. He sounded annoyed, the way he sounded when a waiter brought him the wrong drink. "I have been trying to reach you. Mom says you are not answering her texts." "I have been busy," I said. It felt good to use their word. "Too busy to text your mother?" Bryce scoffed. "Come on, Allison, don't be like that. She is worried. She thinks you are spiraling or something." "I am not spiraling," I said. "I am working." "What do you want, Bryce?" "I need you to look at this insurance policy for me," he said, shifting gears instantly. "I am thinking of switching carriers for the Audi, and the fine print is a nightmare. I figured since you read boring stuff all day, you could take a look." I almost laughed. It was so perfect. He calls to scold me for neglecting Mom, then immediately pivots to asking for free labor. "I can't do that," I said. "What? Why?" "Because I am working," I repeated. "And because I don't want to." There was a stunned silence on the other end. I had never said "I don't want to" Bryce in my life. "What is your problem?" Bryce asked. his voice dropping into that condescending register he used when he wanted to sound like the patriarch in training. "You have been acting weird for weeks. Are you still pouting about Easter?" The air in the hallway seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Pouting?" I asked. "Yeah. Mom said you were all moody about not coming home, so you decided to sulk. Whatever. We gave you space, but now you are being ridiculous." The rage that flared in my chest was white-hot. It was cleansing. They had not only lied about me to each other, they had lied about me to me. They were trying to gaslight me into believing that I was the one who had withdrawn. "I am not pouting, Bryce," I said, my voice steady. "I am just adjusting to the new reality." "What reality?" "The reality where I don't attend family dinners," I said. "The reality where I am busy and want to be alone." "Okay, so you are being passive-aggressive. Great." "No," I said. "I am being accurate. I heard the dinner. Bryce." The line went dead silent. "What?" he asked, his voice losing its arrogant edge. "I heard the dinner," I repeated, articulating every syllable. "Mom butt-dialed me. Easter morning, 10 o'clock. I heard Dad say grace. I heard Tessa ask for the rolls. And I heard Evan ask where I was." The silence stretched out. I could hear Bryce breathing. I could hear the gears in his head turning, trying to find a spin, an angle, a way to regain control of the conversation. "Allison," he started, his tone shifting from aggressive to patronizingly soothing. "Look, you are misunderstanding. Am I? We didn't. Look, it was a last-minute decision to get everyone together. We didn't want you to feel bad that you weren't invited. So Mom made up a little white lie. She was trying to protect your feelings. She told Evan I wanted to be alone," I said. "She told the whole table I chose not to come. That isn't protecting my feelings. Bryce, that is protecting her reputation." "You are blowing this out of proportion," Bryce said, and his voice was getting tighter. "It was just a dinner. Why do you have to be so sensitive? This is exactly why Mom walks on eggshells around you. You take everything so personally." I closed my eyes. "You take everything so personally. The ultimate weapon of the emotional abuser. If you react to being hurt, you are the problem." "I am not being sensitive," I said. "I am being clear." "Well, you are making a big deal out of nothing," he insisted. "We just wanted a nice family day without any drama. And now look what you are doing. You are creating drama from 3 states away." I realized then that there was no winning this conversation. He would never admit they were wrong. He would twist and turn and rewrite history until I was the villain. I looked at the phone. I looked at the red end call button. "I am not creating drama," I said. "I am going back to work. Don't you hang up on I pressed the button. I severed the connection. I stood in the hallway of my office building, the phone cool in my hand. My heart was racing, but my hands were steady. I had done it. For the first time in 34 years, I had not apologized. I had not backed down. I had not accepted the crumb of affection they offered wrapped in an insult. I walked back into the conference room. My boss looked up. "Everything okay, Allison?" he asked. I sat down and opened my laptop. I looked at the code scrolling across the screen. It was logical. It was consistent. It followed rules. "Yes," I said. "Everything is fine. I just had to cancel a subscription." I went back to work, but in the background of my mind, I opened the mental file I had created. I added a new entry. May 25th. Call with Bryce. Confirmed knowledge of the lie. Subject attempted to reframe exclusion as protection. Subject accused me of sensitivity. Outcome: connection terminated. The evidence was piling up, and I was just getting started. The silence that followed my termination of the call with Bryce was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of a trench war where both sides have retreated to their bunkers to sharpen their bayonets. I expected them to call back. I expected an escalation, perhaps a screaming match, or at the very least, a defensive text message listing all the ways I was wrong. But the Hall family does not fight with volume. They fight with revisionism. In the weeks following my confrontation with Bryce, the narrative shifted. I could feel the change in the atmosphere, a subtle barometric pressure drop that signaled a new strategy. They stopped trying to convince me that the Easter lie was a kindness. Instead, they began to treat me as the aggressor. I became the volatile element. I was the one who couldn't take a joke. I was the one holding on to a grudge. I was the one damaging the family unit because I refused to sweep the debris under the rug. The first salvo of this new campaign arrived in my inbox on a Tuesday morning in May. It was an email from my father. The subject line read, "Family Matters." I stared at it over my morning coffee. My father never emailed me. He preferred to relay messages through my mother or, on rare occasions, leave a voicemail that sounded like a corporate memo. An email meant he had drafted it, edited it, and likely had my mother proofread it to ensure it struck the perfect chord of disappointment and high-ground morality. I opened it. "Dear Allison, your mother tells me you are still upset about the confusion regarding Easter. I want to say that we are all very saddened by this continued silence. In this family, we believe that holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. We are a family, and families forgive. We move forward. We do not dwell on small misunderstandings. We hope you can find it in your heart to let this go so we can be whole again. Love, Dad." I read it twice. Then I read it a third time, looking for the invisible ink. I was looking for the words, "I am sorry." I was looking for, "We messed up." I was looking for, "We should not have lied." They were not there. Instead, I found a masterclass in deflection. The lie was renamed a confusion. My reaction to being erased was labeled as holding on to anger, and the burden of repair was placed entirely on my shoulders. We hope you can find it in your heart to let this go. It was a brilliant maneuver. By framing the issue as a matter of forgiveness, he had positioned himself as the benevolent patriarch and me as the stubborn, unforgiving child. If I continued to be angry, I was proving his point. If I accepted his non-apology, I was accepting that my feelings were invalid. I didn't reply. I simply dragged the email into the folder marked Evidence. June arrived, bringing with it the heat of summer and my 35th birthday. 35 is a milestone. It is the kind of birthday that usually warrants a card with a handwritten note, a phone call in the morning, maybe a package sent a few days early. In previous years, my mother would call me at 9 in the morning, singing happy birthday off-key, asking me what I was doing for dinner, demanding photos of my cake. This year, the morning passed in silence. I went to work. I sat at my desk at Rivergate Data Solutions and monitored a firewall breach for a client in healthcare. I accepted the polite wishes of my colleagues. I bought myself a cupcake from the bakery down the street. My phone remained silent. By 6 in the evening, the reality set in. They were not going to call. This was the punishment. I had refused to accept their version of reality, so I was being exiled from their calendar. At 8:45 in the evening, my phone finally buzzed. It was a text from Tessa. "Happy birthday, Al. Hope 35 treats you well. XOXO." It was the kind of text you send to a college roommate you haven't seen in 10 years. It was low effort, impersonal, and arrived late enough to show that I was an afterthought, but early enough to claim she hadn't forgotten. There was no call from my parents, no card in the mail, no gift. For the first time in my life, my parents had boycotted my existence. It wasn't just neglect anymore. It was a sanction. They were withholding affection to starve me into submission. They were treating me like a rogue state that needed to be brought to heel through economic isolation. I ate my cupcake alone in my kitchen. I didn't cry. I just noted the data point. June 12th. Birthday ignored by primary caregivers. Minimal contact from sibling. A few weeks later, the isolation escalated from passive silence to active exclusion. I was scrolling through Instagram on a lunch break, mindlessly tapping through stories, when I saw a post from one of Bryce's friends. It was a guy I had met a few times at family barbecues, a loud, frat boy type named Kevin. The photo showed a rooftop bar in Cincinnati. There was a banner that read, "She said yes." In the center of the photo, Bryce was holding a glass of champagne, his arm around his girlfriend, Sarah. Sarah was holding up her hand, showing off a diamond ring that caught the sunlight. They were surrounded by people. I saw my parents in the background, beaming. I saw Tessa holding a sparkler. I saw Evan. I saw cousins I hadn't seen in 2 years. It was an engagement party. It wasn't a small, spur-of-the-moment gathering. It was a planned event. There were catered appetizers. There was a photographer. Everyone was dressed in cocktail attire. I had not been invited. I hadn't even been told he was proposing. I sat there in the break room, the cold air conditioning humming against my skin, and looked at the faces of my family. They looked radiant. They looked complete. There was no gap where I should have been. The composition of the photo was perfect without me. I realized then that this was not just about punishment. This was about curation. The Hall family viewed themselves as a brand. They were selling an image of success, cohesion, and suburban perfection. Bryce was the golden boy closing the deal. Tessa was the perfect mother. My parents were the benevolent founders. And me? I was the glitch. I was the single, 35-year-old daughter with the mysterious job and the difficult attitude. I didn't fit the vibe of the engagement party. I would have been the awkward element, the one asking questions, the one who knew the truth about the Easter dinner. I was a threat to the aesthetic. So they cropped me out. I zoomed in on my mother's face in the photo. She was laughing, her head thrown back, a glass of wine in her hand. She didn't look like a woman mourning the estrangement of her daughter. She looked like a woman who was relieved she didn't have to manage me. I didn't like or comment on the photo. I took a screenshot. I added it to the folder. Summer faded into autumn. The leaves in Denver turned gold and then brown. The silence from Ohio became the new normal. I stopped expecting calls. I stopped checking the mailbox for olive branches. I focused on my work. I focused on my therapy. I started to build a life that didn't require their approval to remain standing. Then came November, Thanksgiving. The approach of the holiday season usually triggers a frantic negotiation of logistics in the Hall family. Who is flying where? Who is making the turkey? Who is picking up Grandma? This year, there was no negotiation. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. It was the first time she had contacted me directly since the weather check text back in May. Hi, Allison. With everything going on, we are going to keep Thanksgiving very small this year. Just the immediate local family. We know how busy you are with work, and we don't want you to feel pressured to travel. Enjoy your day. I read the message and felt a cold admiration for her craft. We don't want you to feel pressured to travel. She had framed my disinvitation as a favor. She was releasing me from an obligation. If I complained, I would look ungrateful. She had successfully fired me from Thanksgiving and made it look like she was giving me a severance package of free time. Just the immediate local family. That was the new line in the sand. I was no longer immediate. I was geographical collateral damage. I replied with a single word. Understood. I didn't fight. I didn't beg. I didn't ask why immediate included Evan's parents, who lived 2 hours away, as I suspected they would be there. But not me. Thanksgiving Day arrived. I spent it volunteering at a food bank in Denver. It was grueling, unglamorous work, sorting cans and packing boxes. But it felt real. It felt honest. I went home, roasted a chicken for myself, and watched a movie. Then, inevitably, came the social media post. It was late in the evening when the notification popped up. Marlene Hall added 14 new photos. I opened Facebook. The album was titled, Thankful for Our Blessings, 2025. The first photo was the group shot. The table was set with the good china, the gold-rimmed plates that were only used for royalty and church elders. The turkey was perfectly browned. The candles were lit. Everyone was there. My parents, Tessa and Evan, the kids, Bryce and his new fiancée, Sarah. Evan's parents were there, just as I suspected, even a neighbor. Mrs. Gable was squeezed in at the end of the table, but it was the 5th photo in the album that stopped my heart. It was a close-up of the table setting. My mother loved to document her tablescapes. She had used handwritten place cards for everyone, tied with rustic twine around linen napkins. The camera focused on a specific setting near the head of the table. There was a plate. There was a crystal goblet. There was a full set of silverware, and on the place card, written in my mother's looping, elegant calligraphy, was the name Biscuit. Biscuit is Tessa's golden retriever. The dog was sitting in a chair. In the next photo, the dog was actually sitting at the table, a napkin tied around its neck. Looking at the camera with a goofy grin, while the family laughed and pointed, I stared at the screen. There was a seat for the dog. They had set a place, with china and crystal, for an animal. They had gone to the trouble of writing a name card for a pet. They had made space for a creature that licked its own fur. But they had told their daughter that there was no room for her because they wanted to keep it small. It wasn't just a joke. I knew my family. This was a message. The message was, we have space, we have food, we have chairs. We just don't have space for you. The message was, this seat could be occupied by anyone, a neighbor, an in-law, a dog, as long as it is not you. The message was, you are less essential to this family than a pet. I looked at the photo of the dog for a long time. In the past, this would have crushed me. The old Allison, the one who craved their validation like oxygen, would have dissolved into tears. I would have called Tessa, sobbing, asking how they could be so cruel. I would have sent a paragraph-long text to my mother asking what I had done to deserve being replaced by a golden retriever. But as I sat there in the blue light of my laptop, I realized something strange. My eyes were dry. My chest didn't hurt. My throat didn't constrict. Instead, I felt a click. It was the sound of a lock engaging. It was the sound of the final tumblers falling into place. For months, I had been operating on pain. I had been fueled by the raw, hot energy of betrayal. I was the wounded animal trying to understand why the pack had turned on it. But looking at the name Biscuit on that card, the heat vanished. It was replaced by something cold, hard, and incredibly sharp. I wasn't sad anymore. I was done. The grief evaporated, leaving behind only clarity. They had shown me exactly who they were. They had shown me the hierarchy. They had shown me the value of my stock in the Hall family enterprise. And it was trading lower than dog food. I closed the laptop. I didn't comment on the photo. I didn't text them. I didn't block them. Blocking them would be emotional. Blocking them would show them that they got to me. Blocking them would be a reaction. I wasn't going to react anymore. I was going to act. I walked into my bedroom and opened the safe in my closet. I took out my financial records. I took out the deed to my car. I took out my life insurance policy, the one that still listed my parents as the primary beneficiaries. I sat down at my desk and pulled out a fresh notepad. I wrote the date at the top, November 27th, 2025. Then I wrote a list. Item 1. Revoke medical power of attorney. Item 2. Update beneficiary status on all accounts. Item 3. Contact estate lawyer. Item 4. Investigate parental finances. The time for waiting was over. The time for hoping was over. They wanted to treat me like a stranger? Fine. I would become the most dangerous kind of stranger. I would become a stranger who knew all their secrets, but owed them absolutely no loyalty. I picked up the pen and underlined the last item on the list. The dog could have the seat at the table. I didn't want a seat anymore. I wanted the table flipped. I turned off the light and went to sleep. And for the first time since Easter, I slept through the entire night. After the Thanksgiving incident involving the dog and the place card, I did not burn the bridge. I simply stopped maintaining it. There is a misconception that cutting people off requires a dramatic declaration. We think of it as a cinematic moment where you scream, "I am done with you," and slam a door so hard the plaster cracks. But real detachment is far quieter. It is the cessation of effort. It is the decision to stop rowing a boat that everyone else is drilling holes in. I did not block their numbers. I did not unfollow them on social media. I simply stopped being the one who initiated. I stopped sending the Tuesday morning, "Have a great week" texts. I stopped liking the photos of my nieces and nephews within 5 minutes of them being posted. I stopped looking for flights to Ohio. I expected a backlash. I expected my mother to call and ask why I was being so distant. I expected Bryce to text me accusing me of being petty. But the most painful surprise was that there was no backlash. There was only silence. When I stopped reaching out, the communication died instantly. It was as if I had been playing a game of catch with a wall, and the moment I stopped throwing the ball, the game ended. They did not notice I was gone, because they had never really noticed I was there. I was not a person to them. I was a function. I was the appliance that hummed in the background, and as long as I wasn't making a strange noise, they didn't think to check on me. The silence was vast, but for the first time, it wasn't lonely. It was spacious. I began seeing Dr. Kara Wynne in early December. She was a woman in her 50s with short gray hair and a gaze that felt like it was scanning my source code. She was not the kind of therapist who offered tissues and platitudes. She did not tell me that my family loved me in their own way. "You are looking for a reason," she said to me during our third session. "You want to know why they treat you this way because you think if you find the cause, you can fix it. But you cannot fix a system that is working exactly as it was designed to work." I sat in her comfortable leather chair, staring at a generic watercolor painting on the wall. "So what do? Do I just accept that I don't have a family?" "You have a family," she corrected. "You just don't have the family you want. The question is not how to change them. The question is, how do you want this story to end? When you look back at this in 10 years, do you want to see a woman who spent a decade begging for scraps, or a woman who built her own table?" I took that question home with me. I carried it around like a stone in my pocket. I started to reclaim my physical space. My apartment in Denver had always been decorated with a subconscious impermanence, as if I were ready to pack up and move back to Ohio at a moment's notice. I had a guest room set up specifically for my parents. Even though they had visited me exactly once in 4 years, I turned the guest room into a gym. I sold the queen-sized bed that my mother had complained was too soft and bought a rowing machine and a set of weights. I started waking up at 5 in the morning, not to hustle like Bryce, but to feel the physical reality of my own body. There is something grounding about lifting a heavy weight. It is simple physics. You exert force, and the world moves. It was a stark contrast to my emotional life, where no amount of force seemed to move anything. I started cooking for myself, not the quick, sad meals of a single woman eating over the sink, but complex, demanding recipes. I made saffron risotto. I learned to debone a duck. I set the table for one, used the good napkins, and poured myself a glass of wine. I was teaching myself a new language of worth. I was treating Allison Hall like a guest of honor in her own home. I also turned my attention to my career at Rivergate Data Solutions. I had been reliable but invisible, much like I was in my family. I decided to change that. I updated my certifications. I volunteered for a high-stakes project involving a breach at a regional bank. I negotiated a salary adjustment. I poured the extra money into my emergency fund. I set a goal. 6 months of living expenses, then 9 months, then a year. I wanted a fortress of cash around me. I wanted to know that no matter what happened, if I lost my job, if I got sick, if the world ended, I would not have to call Greg and Marlene Hall for a loan. Dependency was the leash they used to control us, and I was cutting it thread by thread. Life became rhythmic. Work, gym, therapy, cooking, sleep. It was a monochromatic existence, lacking the highs and lows of family drama, but it was peaceful. I was healing, or so I thought. But the universe has a way of testing your resolve just when you think you are safe. It happened on a Tuesday evening in late January, almost 9 months after the Easter call. I had just come home from the gym. I was sweaty and tired, sorting through the mail that had piled up in my building's lobby. Most of it was junk: flyers for pizza, offers for credit cards, a catalog for furniture I didn't need. But there was one envelope that stood out. It was from a national bank. The logo was familiar. It was the bank my parents had used for 30 years. The envelope was addressed to Greg and Marlene Hall, but the address was mine. Apartment 4B, Denver, Colorado. I frowned. Why would my parents' bank mail come to me? I hadn't lived with them in over a decade. My address in Denver was completely separate. My first instinct was to be helpful. The old Allison would have texted Mom immediately. "Hey, got some mail of yours. I will forward it." But the new Allison paused. I looked at the envelope. It had a red stamp on the front. Urgent. Action required regarding your loan modification request. My stomach dropped. Loan modification? My parents were wealthy, or at least, they performed wealth. They lived in a large house in a premium neighborhood. They drove new cars. They went on vacations. My father had just retired with a fanfare that suggested a golden parachute. People like Greg and Marlene Hall did not modify loans. They paid them off. I took the envelope upstairs. I sat it on my kitchen counter, right where the phone had sat on Easter morning. I knew I shouldn't open it. It was a federal crime to open someone else's mail, but the address was mine. Technically, the system thought this was for me, or at least that I was the custodian of this information. I stared at it while the water for my tea boiled. Why was it sent here? The only reason a bank sends mail to a relative's address is if the primary address has been flagged as invalid, or if the system has linked the profiles due to a co-signing event or a designated alternate contact. I had never co-signed anything for them. I remembered the Easter call. "We are not doing dinner. It is too much work." I remembered the engagement party, the lavish spending. I remembered the Thanksgiving photo, the opulence. Something didn't fit. I reached for my letter opener. I sliced the envelope. The letter was a form letter, but the details were specific. It was a notice regarding a request to restructure a home equity line of credit. It referenced a previous application dated March 28, 2025. March 28th. I looked at the calendar on my phone. Easter last year was April 20th. March 28th was exactly 3 weeks before Easter. The letter was asking for additional income verification. It mentioned that the primary applicant stated income reduction due to retirement, and secondary applicant listed income from independent contracting. Then I saw the line that made the room spin. Please confirm the occupancy status of the additional resident listed on the application. Allison Hall. I stopped breathing. Additional resident. They had listed me as a resident. I read the paragraph again. The bank was asking for verification because their records showed I had a primary residence in Colorado. Yet the application claimed I was living in the Ohio home, contributing to the household income. The pieces slammed together in my mind with the force of a car crash. They hadn't canceled Easter because they were tired. They hadn't canceled Easter because they wanted to be alone. They canceled Easter because they were in the middle of a financial maneuver that required me to be a resident on paper. If I had come home, if I had been there talking about my life in Denver, talking about my job in Colorado, it might have complicated things if they were trying to push something through a local notary or a bank officer who might stop by. Or maybe it was simpler. Maybe they were just stressed out of their minds trying to refinance their lifestyle before the retirement reality hit, and they couldn't handle the expense of the dinner. But listing me as a resident? That was fraud. I put the letter down. My hands were shaking, not with sadness this time, but with adrenaline. I am a cybersecurity analyst. I track data. I find anomalies, and I had just found a massive one. I opened my laptop. I didn't go to social media. I went to the credit bureau. I have a subscription to a detailed credit monitoring service, the kind that professionals use. I logged in. I navigated to the inquiries section. I expanded the history for the last 12 months. I scrolled down to March and April of last year. There it was. March 29th, 2025. Hard inquiry. First National Bank of Ohio. I stared at the screen. A hard inquiry only happens when you apply for credit. I had not applied for credit in Ohio. I clicked on the details. The inquiry was associated with a joint application. My parents hadn't just listed me as a resident. They had tried to add me to the loan. They had tried to use my credit score, my income, my stability, to prop up their application. But why didn't it go through? I looked at the status. Denied/incomplete. They must have been blocked by a verification step. That was why they needed me. That was why the bank was still sending letters. They were trying to revive the application, trying to find a way to bypass the verification. And the Easter cancellation? If I had come home, I would have seen the paperwork. I would have seen the stress. Or maybe, just maybe, they had planned to ask me to sign something in person, slip it in between the ham and the dessert, framed as just some estate planning for the future, but then they panicked. Maybe they realized I would ask too many questions. I was an analyst. After all, I read the fine print. So they aborted the mission. They canceled the dinner to buy themselves time to figure out another way to forge the path. The butt dial wasn't just a moment of social exclusion. It was the sound of people enjoying the relief of not having their victim in the room. I sat back in my chair. The blue light of the monitor illuminated my face. I felt a cold rage settling in my gut. It was different from the hurt of being unloved. This was the fury of being used. They had treated me like furniture. Yes, but they had also treated me like an asset. I was a resource to be mined. My credit score was just another thing they felt entitled to, like my time, my energy, and my self-esteem. I thought about Bryce. She never knows when to clock out. Did he know? Did Tessa know? Or were my parents drowning in debt? Keeping up the appearance of the perfect suburban monarchs, using their children as life rafts? It didn't matter. I was done being a raft. I picked up my phone. I didn't call my mother. I didn't call my father. I called the number on the back of my credit card first. I need to freeze my credit, I told the automated system. Immediately, on all 3 bureaus, I went through the prompts. Freeze confirmed. Then I opened my work email. I searched for a contact I had met during the bank breach project. He was a shark of a lawyer, a man who specialized in civil litigation and financial fraud. I drafted an email. Subject: consultation request. Potential identity theft/familial fraud. I typed out the summary. I didn't use emotional language. I didn't talk about the dog or the place card. I talked about the hard inquiry. I talked about the letter regarding residency. I talked about the unauthorized use of my personal identifying information. I hit send. Then I created a new folder on my desktop. I named it The Audit. I moved the timeline of events document into it. I moved the screenshot of the butt dial into it. I moved the photo of the dog into it. And I scanned the bank letter and added it to the file. I walked over to the window and looked out at the city lights of Denver. Doctor, Wynn had asked me, "How do you want this to end?" I had thought I wanted an apology. I had thought I wanted them to admit they were wrong. But now I realized that was too small. An apology is just words, and my family was very good at words. They could talk their way out of anything. I didn't want words. I wanted consequences. I wasn't going to scream at them. I wasn't going to throw a tantrum at the next family gathering. I was going to let the law do the talking. I was going to let the credit bureaus do the talking. They wanted to play games with numbers? Fine. I do numbers for a living. I went back to the kitchen and poured my tea. It was cold, but I drank it anyway. I felt a strange sense of peace. The confusion was gone. The why didn't matter anymore. Whether they did it out of malice or desperation was irrelevant. The fact was, they had crossed a line that wasn't emotional. It was legal, and unlike feelings, the law doesn't care if you are family. I turned off the kitchen light. The rebuilding phase was over. The fortification phase was complete. Now, it was time for the audit. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday in mid-February, slicing through the mundane stack of utility bills and grocery circulars like a shark fin cutting through gray water. It was heavy, cream-colored cardstock, textured, with my name and address calibrated in a calligraphy font that I recognized instantly. It was the specific font my sister Tessa had used for her wedding invitations, her baby shower announcements, and her annual holiday newsletters. It was the font of the Hall family brand. Elegant, expensive, and meticulously curated. I carried it into my kitchen, the same kitchen where I had once stood paralyzed by a phone call, and placed it on the counter. I didn't open it immediately. I made tea. I washed a few dishes. I treated the envelope like a suspicious package that might contain anthracite. When I finally slit the seal, a shower of gold confetti spilled out. dusting my granite countertop with glitter. Inside was an invitation that looked more like a summons to a royal coronation than a family gathering. The Hall family and the Friends of St. Jude's Academy. Request the honor of your presence at the annual Spring Garden Gala, celebrating Tessa Miller's 38th birthday and benefiting the arts program. Saturday, March 21st, 6 o'clock in the evening, the Miller residence, black tie optional, professional photography will be present. Theme, Roots and Wings, a celebration of family unity. I stared at the card. The irony was so dense it almost had a gravitational pull. Family unity. They were hosting a gala themed around unity less than a year after they had collectively decided I was as essential to the family as a vestigial tale. And they were doing it at Tessa's house, the house that, according to my recent credit report deep dive, was likely leveraged to the hilt. Much like my parents' home, I turned the card over. On the back, in smaller print, was a note. We need full attendance for the donor photos. Please RSVP by March 1st. I understood the game immediately. This wasn't an olive branch. It was a casting call. For 10 months. My absence had been manageable. They could explain it away with Allison is busy or Allison is working. But a gala? A high-profile event with donors, church members, and neighbors? If I wasn't there, the whispers would start. Where is the other sister? Is there trouble in paradise? Why is the family portrait lopsided? People like the Halls live and die by the integrity of their social facade. A missing daughter at a Unity gala is a crack in the foundation. It invites speculation. And speculation is dangerous when you are trying to refinance loans and maintain a lifestyle that your bank account can no longer support. They needed me. They didn't need me. Allison, the human being with feelings and a favorite color. They needed Allison, the prop. They needed the physical body of the second daughter to fill the negative space in the wide-angle lens. I was still holding the card when my phone buzzed. It was Tessa. The timing was impeccable, calculated to hit me just as the mail was being opened in the Mountain Time Zone. Hey, did you get the invite? Mom really wants you there. It would mean so much to her if the whole gang was back together. I read the text and felt a cold, dry amusement. Mom really wants you there. It is the oldest trick in the triangulation handbook. Tessa never asks for herself. She uses Mom as the emotional shield. If I say no, I am not disappointing Tessa. I am breaking our mother's heart. It creates a debt of guilt before negotiations even begin. Note what was missing. There was no, I miss you. There was no, I am sorry we haven't spoken. There was no acknowledgement of the silence that had stretched between us like a desert for almost a year. Just a demand for my presence to service Mom's emotional needs. I didn't reply. I let the text sit there, gathering digital dust. 2 hours later, the heavy artillery arrived. My phone rang. The screen displayed, Dad, my father never calls. In the hierarchy of Hall communications, a call from Greg Hall is reserved for 3 occasions: a death in the family, a severe weather warning, or a financial transaction. I let it ring 3 times. I took a deep breath, centering myself. I wasn't the scared daughter anymore. I was the auditor. I was the one who had seen the credit inquiry. I knew what was in the ledger. I picked up. Hello, Dad. Allison, his voice boomed, rich and warm, a stark contrast to the clipped, dismissive tone I had heard him use on Easter morning when he asked for the gravy. How is my Denver girl? I am fine, I said. Surprised to hear from you. Oh, nonsense, he chuckled, a sound that felt rehearsed. I was just sitting here with your mother, looking at some old photos, and I realized it has been too long. We get so caught up in the rat race, you know? How is work? What is it called again? Rivergate? Rivergate, I confirmed. Work is good, busy. Good, he said. Stable industry. That tech security, recession-proof, right? You are still secure there? Position is solid? The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. There it was. He wasn't asking about my career satisfaction. He was vetting my solvency. He was checking to see if the additional resident on his loan application was still a viable financial host. If I had lost my job, I would be useless to them. Very solid, I lied. I actually just got a promotion. Significant raise. I wanted to see if he would bite. That is fantastic. His enthusiasm jumped a decibel level. I knew it. You have always been the smart one with money, the disciplined one. We were just saying that. Bryce has the flash, but Allison has the foundation. The flattery was so thick, I could practically scrape it off the phone screen. The foundation, that was exactly what they wanted me to be. The concrete slab they could build their debt upon. So, he pivoted, his voice dropping into a register of intimate confidence. Tessa sent out the invites for her gala. Big to do. She is really trying to pull out all the stops for this school fundraiser. It is important to the family image, you know? Showing that we support the community. I got the invite, I said. Great, great. Listen, Allison, Mom and I, we have missed you. We know things have been a little drifted lately. We are not getting any younger. We want the family whole again. This gala. It is the perfect time to reset. No drama. Just family. Will you come? For me? I paused. I let the silence stretch out for 5 seconds, 10 seconds. I wanted him to sweat. I wanted him to wonder if his charm offensive was working. I thought about the inquiry on my credit report. I thought about the letter from the bank asking about my residency, if I didn't go. They would just find another way to forge ahead. They would spin a story about why I wasn't there. They would keep operating in the shadows. But if I went, I would be in the room. I would be at the scene of the crime. I would be able to look them in the eye and see exactly how desperate they were. Allison? His voice faltered slightly. I will be there, I said. You will? He sounded genuinely relieved, perhaps even surprised. That is wonderful. Mom will be thrilled. We will take care of everything. You can stay at the house. No, I cut him off. I will book a hotel. Oh, don't be silly. Your room is… I have already booked a room, I said, my voice flat. I will see you at the gala. Dad? Right? Okay. Well, we can discuss details later. We are just so glad you are coming home. Coming home. He hung up. I sat there, looking at the phone. He hadn't asked about my life. He hadn't asked if I was seeing anyone. He hadn't asked if I was happy. He had verified my income and secured my attendance for a photo op. I opened my laptop and sent a generic email to the RSVP address listed on the card. 2. Tessa Miller Events. From Allison Hall. Subject, RSVP. Spring Garden Gala. Yes, that was it. Just yes. No. Can't wait. No. So excited. No emojis. The response came back in 3 minutes. Confirmed. We are so happy. I have put you at the head table with us. Wear something gold or cream to match the theme if you can. Love you. The speed of the reply told me everything. They had been waiting. They had been holding their breath. My yes was the key that unlocked their family unity tableau. The next afternoon, I had my appointment with Dr. Kara Wynn. I sat in her office, the winter sun of Denver cutting across the Persian rug. I told her about the invitation. I told her about the call. I told her about the credit inquiry I had found in the previous chapter of my life, Dr. Wynn listened, her hands folded in her lap. She didn't take notes this time. So, she said, looking at me over the rim of her glasses, you are going… I am. Why? She asked. You have spent the last 6 months detaching. You have built a firewall. Why walk back into the virus? Because they think I'm coming back to be the daughter, I said. They think the reset button has been pressed. They think that because I said yes, I have accepted the erasure. They think I am returning to the fold to be the silent, supportive Allison who signs papers and passes the potatoes. And who is actually returning? The witness, I said. Doctor. Wynn leaned forward. Allison, be careful. There is a difference between justice and revenge. Justice is about restoring balance. Revenge is about inflicting pain. Which one are you looking for? I don't want to inflict pain, I said honestly. I don't want to scream at them. I don't want to make a scene and ruin Tessa's party. That would just make me the crazy one. That would give them the ammunition to say, "See? She is unstable." Then what is the goal? I want them to see me, I said. Not the version of me they invented to explain my absence. Not the busy Allison. Not the difficult Allison. I want them to look at me and know that I know. I want to stand in that room, in front of their donors and their friends. And I want my presence to be the one thing they cannot spin. You want to be a mirror. Doctor, Wynne said. Yes, mirrors don't attack. They just reflect. If they don't like what they see, that is not the mirror's fault. And if they try to pull you back in, if they try to use this unity theme to trap you into a new obligation, to sign those papers they clearly want you to sign? I smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who has read the terms and conditions and found the loophole. I am counting on it, I said. I am not going there to sign. I am going there to decline. But I am going to do it in person. I am going to do it when they are surrounded by the very audience they are trying to impress. I want to see if they can maintain the unity act when I refuse to play my part. Doctor, Wynne nodded slowly. That is a high-wire act. Allison, it requires absolute emotional discipline. If you get angry, you lose. If you cry, you lose. If you let them trigger you into reverting to the child role, you lose. I won't cry, I said. I used all my tears up on Easter. I left the session feeling a strange, cold energy. I went shopping that weekend. Tessa had requested gold or cream. It was a control move. She wanted the family to look like a matched set of luggage. I went to a high-end boutique in Cherry Creek. I found a dress. It was not cream. It was not gold. It was a deep, midnight blue, the color of a bruise, or the color of a stormy sky, or perhaps the color of a river at night. It was silk, tailored to within an inch of its life. It was elegant, undeniable, and completely, utterly off-brand for the Roots and Wings theme. It was a visual refusal. I bought it. I paid $200 for expedited alterations. Then I called a photographer, not the one Tessa had hired. I knew she would have a family photographer instructed to capture only the smiling moments. I hired a freelancer named Noah Keene. I knew him from a corporate event at Rivergate. He was a photojournalist, a guy who shot protests and city council meetings. He knew how to capture the truth, not the pose. I have a job for you in Cincinnati, I told him over the phone. It is a gala. I don't want glamour shots. I want a documentary. What is the subject? Noah asked. Me, I said. And the space around me. I want you to document the exclusion. If they crop me out, I want you to capture the cropping. If they talk over me, I want you to capture the silence. I want a record of the reality. Noah, can you do that? Sounds like you are building a case. Not an album, he said. Something like that. I hung up. The trap was set. They had baited the hook with family unity and a gala invitation, thinking they were reeling in a compliant fish. They didn't realize they had just invited a shark into the tank. I packed my suitcase. I packed the midnight blue dress. I packed the file folder marked the audit. I checked my bank account. I had 6 months of expenses saved. My credit was frozen. My legal counsel was on standby. I was ready. On the morning of my flight, I stood in my kitchen one last time. I looked at the spot where I had stood almost a year ago, shattered by a lie. We decided to skip it, my mother had said. Well, I wasn't skipping this. I picked up my bag and walked out the door. I was going home, but I wasn't going back to be their daughter. I was going back to be their consequences. The office of Robert Vance was exactly what you would expect from a man who specialized in forensic accounting and civil litigation. It was located on the 42nd floor of a glass tower in downtown Denver, smelling faintly of lemon polish and expensive coffee. There were no family photos on his desk. Only stacks of files and a computer monitor that looked wide enough to land a plane on. I sat opposite him, my hands folded in my lap. I was not there as a daughter. I was there as a client. I pulled the public records on the Hamilton County property, Robert said, sliding a thick document across the mahogany desk toward me, and I cross-referenced it with the credit inquiry you flagged from last March. I picked up the paper. It was a deed of trust, recorded publicly, but buried under layers of legalese that most people never bother to read. Here is the timeline, Robert said, pointing to a date stamped in the upper right corner. Your parents closed on a home equity line of credit for $150,000 on March 25, 2025. I looked at the date. March 25th. Easter had been April 20th. That is almost a month before the holiday, I said, frowning. If they got the money in March, why would they be panicked in April? Because of the stipulations, Robert explained. He flipped the page to a section highlighted in yellow. This was not a standard bank loan. This was a private lending arrangement, likely because their debt-to-income ratio was already too high for a traditional bank. Private lenders have different triggers. This one had a residency and occupancy verification clause set for 30 days post-closing. He pulled out another sheet. This one looked different. It was a photocopy of a document that had the word draft stamped across it in faint gray watermark. This is where it gets interesting, Robert said. This document was in the digital file associated with the inquiry. It is an additional occupant income verification form. I looked at the names listed. Primary borrower, Greg Hall. Secondary borrower, Marlene Hall. Additional occupant, Allison Hall. Relationship, daughter. Status, permanent resident / contributor. My breath hitched. Permanent resident? I have lived in Colorado for 4 years. Exactly, Robert said, but look at the income figure they penciled in next to your name. I looked. It was a number that closely matched my salary from 2 years ago. They were using your income to lower their debt-to-income ratio, Robert said, his voice devoid of emotion. They were presenting a picture to the lender that you lived in the home and contributed to the household expenses. It made the loan look less risky. If they have 3 incomes supporting the mortgage instead of 2, the interest rate drops, and the approval odds skyrocket. I felt the blood drain from my face. It wasn't just that they wanted to borrow money. It was that they had sold my stability to buy their own. I was the collateral. So, I said, piecing the narrative together, the lender required a verification check around Easter? Likely, Robert nodded. The 30-day mark would have fallen right around that weekend. The lender probably scheduled a phone interview or a physical appraisal to confirm who was living in the house. If you had come home for Easter dinner, and a notary or an appraiser had shown up, or if you had mentioned your life in Denver within earshot of a visiting consultant, the whole scheme would have collapsed. So they canceled dinner, I whispered. They cleared the set, Robert corrected. They couldn't risk you being there and saying the wrong thing. They needed to control the narrative. They likely told the lender you were traveling for work or unavailable, but having you physically present would have been a liability. And the letter I got in January? The lender probably did a back-end audit, Robert said. They ran a check on the additional occupant and found your Colorado address. That triggered the automatic letter asking for clarification. Your parents didn't send that letter. The system did, and that is how they got caught. I sat back in the chair. The pieces of the puzzle weren't just fitting. They were locking together with the sound of a prison cell closing. It is fraud, I said. Technically, yes, Robert agreed. Mortgage fraud, misrepresentation of material facts. But since the loan was funded and they are making payments, it is unlikely the lender will prosecute unless they default. However, it puts you in a precarious position. If they default, the lender could come after you, claiming you were a party to the application. I never signed anything. That is your saving grace, but your name is in the file. You need to distance yourself, formally and legally. I will, I said. But first, I need to understand why. Why did they need $150,000 so badly that they would risk a felony? I spent the next 3 nights doing what I do best: digging. I didn't have access to their private bank accounts, but I had access to the internet, and I knew where to look. I looked at the peripheral players. I started with Evan, Tessa's husband. He had always styled himself as an entrepreneur, which in the Hall family meant he had a lot of ideas and very little revenue. I found the filing for his latest venture, a custom cabinetry business called Miller Company. I checked the state lien registry. There were 3 mechanics' liens filed against Miller Company in the last 6 months for unpaid lumber and contract labor. The business was bleeding. Then I looked at Bryce, the hustler, the golden boy. I checked his licensure status on the State Insurance Board website. Bryce Hall, license status, probationary. I dug deeper. There was a disciplinary action from 6 months ago regarding improper solicitation. He hadn't just changed jobs. He had been fired. And the flashy new car? I ran the VIN number from a photo he posted. It was a lease with a high-interest lender. The picture became crystal clear. My parents weren't just living beyond their means. They were the central bank for a failing economy. They were bailing out Evan's business to keep Tessa's lifestyle afloat. They were likely subsidizing Bryce's rent or car payments to keep up the appearance of his success. And I was the only one in the family who wasn't asking them for money. I was the stable child, the one with the clean credit record, the one with the corporate job. I was the perfect resource to exploit because I was the only one who had anything left to give. They didn't invite me to the gala because they missed me. They invited me because the loan money from last year was running out. They needed to refinance again. Or perhaps they needed to show the community and potential investors in Evan's business that the Hall family was still a monolith of success. If I showed up, looking successful and solvent, it validated the brand. It reassured the creditors. I closed my laptop. I wasn't just a prop. I was a credit score and address. The next day, I met Noah Keene at a coffee shop in the Highlands. Noah was a man who looked like he slept in his camera bag. He had messy hair and eyes that moved constantly, scanning the room for angles. "So," Noah said, looking at the contract I had drafted, "let me get this straight. You are hiring me to photograph a party." "Yes. But you don't want pictures of the cake or the speeches." "No. You want me to photograph." "What exactly?" "I want you to photograph the space between people," I said. "I want you to be a documentary photographer in a war zone. But the war is invisible. If my mother hugs me, I want you to capture the moment her smile drops when she turns away. If they position me at the edge of the group photo, I want you to frame the shot so the gap is obvious. I want you to capture the performance." Noah looked at me, intrigued. "You want evidence? I want a reality check," I corrected. "They are going to try to sell a story of family unity. I need a record of the truth. Can you be discreet? I don't want them to know you are working for me. As far as they know, you are just my date who happens to be a photography enthusiast." "I can play that role," Noah said. "I own a suit. But are you sure you want this? Usually, people pay me to make them look better." "I am paying you to make them look real," I said. "And I need the raw files. No retouching, no filters. I want the grain. I want the shadows." I slid an envelope across the table. It contained a cashier's check for $2,000, half up front. "And one more thing," I added. "If things go south, if they ask you to stop taking pictures, you keep shooting until I tell you to stop. You work for me, not them." Noah took the envelope. He smiled, a sharp, cynical smile. "I like this job already." With the visual evidence secured, I turned to the audio. I sat at my desk with my headphones on. I opened the file from the Easter butt dial. I had saved it in 3 different cloud locations, on 2 USB drives, and on my phone. I opened the editing software. I didn't want the whole 4 minutes. I needed the smoking gun. I isolated the waveform. Marlene. "She is busy. She wanted to be alone." Evan. "Allison said she wasn't coming?" Marlene. "Yeah, we decided to skip it." I cleaned up the background noise slightly, just enough to make the voices crisp, but not enough to make it sound doctored. I wanted the clink of the silverware to remain. I wanted the ambient sound of the party to be the jury. I exported the clip. I named it the_truth.mp3. I transferred it to a sleek, metallic USB drive. I put the drive in my purse. I wasn't planning to play it over the speakers at the gala. That was movie stuff. That was messy. I was a professional. But I needed it on me. I needed to know that if they tried to gaslight me, if they tried to tell me I was imagining things, I could reach into my bag and touch the cold metal of the drive. It was my talisman. It was the proof that I wasn't crazy. Finally, the dress. The gala was 3 days away. I took the midnight blue silk gown out of the garment bag. Tessa had said cream or gold. Cream is the color of surrender. It is soft, blending in, inoffensive. Gold is the color of their brand. Flashy, expensive, desperate to shine. Midnight blue is the color of the deep ocean. It is the color of authority. It is the color of a judge's robe in a nightmare. I put it on. The tailor had done impeccable work. The dress fit like a second skin, high-necked and long-sleeved, but backless. It was modest and severe from the front, but vulnerable and striking from behind. It commanded attention without asking for it. I stood in front of my full-length mirror. I didn't look like the easy Allison anymore. I didn't look like the girl who would sit on a stool in the kitchen peeling potatoes while everyone else drank mimosas. I looked like a woman who owned her own home. I looked like a woman who had a lawyer on speed dial. I looked like a woman who knew exactly how much her parents owed on their mortgage. My phone buzzed on the vanity. It was a text from Mom. "Can't wait to see you. Remember, we are taking the family photo at 6:15 sharp. Don't be late. And don't forget, cream or gold." I looked at the text. I looked at my reflection in the dark blue dress. "I won't be late," I said to the empty room. I reached for my clutch. I put the USB drive inside. I put my phone inside. I put a copy of the draft occupant verification form, folded into a small square. Inside the zippered pocket, Doctor. Wynne had asked me if I wanted justice or revenge. I looked at myself one last time. Revenge is emotional. Revenge is hot. Revenge is throwing wine in someone's face. This wasn't revenge. This was an audit. They wanted to use me as a prop to hold up their crumbling facade. They wanted to paste my face into their family collage to hide the cracks in the wall. Fine then, I would be a prop, but I would be a mirror. And when they looked at me, they weren't going to see the daughter they could use. They were going to see the reflection of everything they had tried to hide. I zipped the clutch shut. The sound was final, like a gavel hitting wood. I was ready to go to the ball. The invitation stated that the event would begin at 6 o'clock. In the old days, the version of me that existed before the Easter silence would have arrived at 5:30. I would have been in the kitchen, apron on over my dress, helping the caterers arrange the veggie tray or frantically steaming wrinkles out of my mother's sash. I would have been the backstage crew ensuring the show started on time. But I was no longer part of the crew. I was the audience. And the audience does not arrive early. I pulled my rental car up to the valet stand at Tessa's house at exactly 6:10 in the evening. Tessa's home in the affluent suburb of Indian Hill was lit up like a cruise ship. String lights draped every oak tree in the front yard. A quartet was playing Vivaldi on the patio. There were already 50 people mingling on the lawn, a sea of linen suits and silk dresses, sipping champagne and laughing the polite, hollow laugh of donors who want to be seen giving money. I stepped out of the car. The valet, a young kid who looked bored, took my keys. "Nice dress," he muttered. "Thank you," I said. I smoothed the fabric of my midnight blue gown. Amidst the sea of cream, gold, and beige that Tessa had mandated, I looked like a drop of ink in a glass of milk. I was not blending in. I was a punctuation mark. I walked up the stone path to the garden gate. I didn't rush. I didn't look down to check my phone. I walked with the steady, measured pace of someone who has read the venue's safety regulations and knows exactly where the exits are. I stepped through the archway into the main garden. For a split second, the hum of conversation seemed to dip. It wasn't a total silence. That only happens in movies. But it was a definite lull, a frequency shift. Heads turned. I saw my Aunt Kathy first. She was holding a skewer of melon, her mouth slightly open. She looked at me not with joy, but with the bewildered expression of someone seeing a ghost they thought had been exorcised. Her eyes darted to my dress, then to the gold-clad crowd, then back to me. She still exists, her face said. Then I saw my parents. They were holding court near the fountain. My father was wearing a cream tuxedo jacket that made him look like a retired colonel. My mother was in shimmering gold lame. They were laughing at something the local pastor was saying. My father saw me first. His smile didn't drop, but it froze. It became a rigid geometric shape on his face. His eyes did a quick, vertical scan. Shoes, dress, hair, jewelry. It was an appraisal. He wasn't looking at his daughter. He was looking at the additional occupant. He was checking to see if I looked solvent enough to satisfy a loan officer. My mother turned. Her reaction was different. Her eyes narrowed by a fraction of a millimeter. It was the look a stage manager gives when a prop is placed in the wrong spot. She was assessing damage control. Why is she in blue? Why is she late? Is she going to make a scene? Before they could move, Tessa intercepted me. She came barreling through the crowd like a heat-seeking missile wrapped in chiffon. "Allison!" she shrieked. It was a performance. It was a projection of sisterly delight designed to reach the back row of the donor list. She threw her arms around me. The hug was tight. Too tight. It wasn't an embrace. It was a restraint. She squeezed me hard, pressing the air out of my lungs, holding me there for the photographers. "You made it," she said, pulling back but keeping her hands on my shoulders, effectively pinning me in place. Her smile was blinding, but her eyes were cold, hard flints. "And you are wearing blue." "It is midnight," I said, my voice calm. I couldn't find anything in cream that didn't wash me out. "We said gold or cream," she hissed through her teeth, her smile never wavering for the onlookers. "It is the theme, Allison, roots and wings, earth tones." "I am the water," I said. "Every garden needs water, right?" Tessa's eye twitched. She didn't know how to handle me. She was used to the Allison who apologized. The Allison who would have run to the bathroom to cry if she realized she had violated the dress code. "Well," she said, patting my arm with a little too much force. "At least you are here. Mom was worried." "I can see that," I said, looking over Tessa's shoulder at our mother, who was now approaching with the slow, deliberate momentum of a battleship. "Allison," Mom said. She didn't hug me. She offered her cheek, the way one greets a distant acquaintance or a rival. I leaned in and air-kissed the space near her ear. She smelled of expensive perfume and hairspray. "You are late," she whispered. 10 minutes, I said. "Traffic." "Everyone has been asking about you," she said, her voice raising to a conversational volume for the benefit of the woman standing next to us. "We missed you so much at Easter and Thanksgiving. It is just wonderful to have the whole family back together." She looked at me, daring me to contradict her, daring me to say, "You didn't invite me." I smiled. It was the sharpest smile I had ever worn. "I wouldn't miss this," I said. "I know how important appearances are to you." Mom blinked. She wasn't sure if that was a compliment or an insult. She decided to take it as a compliment. "Yes, well, go say hello to your father. And please, Allison, try to mingle with the Evans family. They are big donors." She turned away instantly to greet a man in a velvet blazer. I was dismissed. I walked into the crowd. I felt a presence to my left. I didn't look, but I knew who it was. Noah Keene. He was wearing a charcoal suit that fit him surprisingly well, blending in perfectly with the waitstaff and the younger guests. He had a camera slung over his shoulder, a high-end mirrorless that looked professional but not intrusive. He didn't wave. He didn't acknowledge me. But as I moved through the garden, shaking hands with people who barely remembered my name, I heard the soft, electronic click of his shutter. I watched him work. He wasn't taking photos of people smiling at the camera. He was taking photos of the moments in between. He captured Aunt Kathy turning her back to me when I approached the buffet. He captured the wave and, my brother-in-law, looked at his watch nervously while talking to a man who looked like a creditor. He captured me standing alone by the hydrangeas, while a circle of family friends laughed at a joke Bryce told 10 feet away. The exclusion wasn't loud, it was atmospheric. It was a subtle repelling force, like two magnets with the same polarity, and Noah was documenting every invisible wave. At 6:45, the moment arrived. "Family photo," Tessa announced from the small stage set up near the gazebo. "Everyone, please, we need the whole Hall and Miller clan for the newsletter." This was it, the main event. The guests cooed and applauded as we gathered. The official event photographer, a woman with a bright smile and a very large flash, began directing us. "Okay, let us get the grandparents in the middle," she chirped. "Tessa, Evan, you guys on the left with the kids, Bryce, Sarah, you guys on the right." My parents took their positions in the center, radiating patriarchal benevolence. Tessa and her brood crowded in. Bryce and his fiancée struck a pose that belonged on a magazine cover. I stood there, waiting for my instruction. There was no instruction. The center was full. The flanks were full. "And, sister?" the photographer asked, looking at me, clearly not knowing my name. "Can you maybe squeeze in on the end there?" I stepped forward. I moved toward the space between my mother and Bryce. It was a natural gap. As I stepped in, my mother shifted. It wasn't an aggressive shove. It was a graceful social glide. She turned her body toward Bryce, angling her shoulder out. Effectively, she closed the gap. She created a wall of gold lame. To the casual observer, it just looked like she was turning to smile at her son. But to me, and to the lens, it was a physical blockade. I was forced to step back and move to the far, far edge, next to Evan, almost into the bushes. "Perfect," the official photographer yelled. "Everyone say unity." "Unity," they chorused. I didn't open my mouth. I just stared straight ahead, my chin high. From the corner of my eye, I saw Noah. He was crouching low behind a rosebush. He wasn't photographing the group. He was photographing the gap. He was photographing my mother's turned back and my isolated figure in the midnight blue dress, separated from the gold mass by a foot of empty air. He gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. Got it. The flash fired. The image of the Happy Hall family was secured, with me hanging off the edge like a loose thread. We dispersed. I went to the bar and ordered a sparkling water. My hand was steady, but my heart was hammering a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. "Allison!" It was Tessa again. She was standing on the stage, holding a microphone. The music had stopped. The garden was quiet. 200 faces were turned toward the gazebo. "I am so glad my little sister could make it all the way from Denver," Tessa announced, her voice amplified across the lawn. "It has been too long since we were all together. Allison, why don't you come up and say a few words? Maybe give a toast to the family?" My stomach dropped. It was an ambush. She hadn't asked me beforehand. This wasn't on the schedule. She was banking on social pressure. She knew I hated public speaking. She knew I hated being the center of attention. She wanted me to stumble, or better yet, she wanted me to come up and offer a bland, teary-eyed tribute to how wonderful it was to be home. She wanted me to publicly validate the lie. She wanted the prodigal daughter to bless the house. If I refused, I looked petulant. If I agreed and played along, I was complicit. My father was beaming near the front row. He looked confident. He thought he had me. He thought the stable daughter would never risk embarrassing the family in front of the donors. I set my glass down on a high-top table. I walked toward the stage. The sound of my heels on the wooden steps echoed in the silence. Tessa handed me the microphone. She leaned in, whispering, "Keep it short, and don't be weird." I took the mic. It was heavy. I looked out at the crowd. I saw the faces of people who thought they knew this family. I saw the neighbors who believed the Christmas cards. I saw the banker who was probably approving their loans based on the illusion of our collective wealth. I looked at my parents. My mother's smile was fixed, but her eyes were tight. She was holding her breath. My father was nodding encouragingly, like a coach watching a player he owns. I didn't look at my notes, because I didn't have any. I didn't look at the USB drive in my purse, because I didn't need it yet. "Thank you, Tessa," I said. My voice was clear. It didn't shake. "It is educational to be back." A few people chuckled, thinking it was a joke. "Tessa chose the theme Roots and Wings for tonight," I continued. "It is a beautiful sentiment. We often talk about roots as the things that hold us down, that keep us steady, and we talk about wings as the things that let us fly away." I paused. I let the silence hang for a beat longer than was comfortable. "But sometimes," I said, "we forget that for roots to be healthy, they need light, they need honesty. If you bury them in the dark, if you cover them up with layers of decoration, they rot." The smile on my father's face faltered. He stopped nodding. "And wings," I went on, looking directly at my mother, "are not about escaping. They are about having the strength to stand on your own air, to know that you don't need to be propped up by anyone else to stay aloft." The crowd was quiet now. They sensed the shift. This wasn't a birthday toast. It was something else. "So," I said, raising my empty hand as if holding a glass, "I want to propose a toast. To Tessa, happy birthday." I turned my gaze to my parents. I locked eyes with my father. "And to the Hall family," I said, my voice dropping an octave, becoming steel. "May we always be a table where the truth has a seat, even if we have to drag a chair over ourselves. Cheers." I lowered the microphone. There was a beat of absolute silence. Then, a few people clapped, tentatively, confused. Then a few more joined in, driven by the social instinct to fill the void. But my family didn't clap. My father was staring at me with a look of pure, unadulterated panic. He understood. He heard the code. Where the truth has a seat. He knew I knew about the additional occupant. He knew I knew about the resident lie. My mother looked like she had swallowed a lemon. Her mouth was a thin, white line. She looked at the guests, gauging if they had understood the subtext. Tessa snatched the microphone back from me. "Thank you, Allison. So poetic. And now, dessert is served in the conservatory." She cranked the charm up to 11, desperate to pivot the energy. The music started again, something loud and upbeat. I walked down the steps. As I passed my father, he reached out and grabbed my elbow. His grip was hard. "What was that?" he hissed, his voice low and dangerous. "Don't let me hear you say another word." I stopped. I looked at his hand on my arm, then I looked at his face. "I didn't say anything, Dad," I said calmly. "I just wished for truth. Why does that scare you?" His eyes darted around. "We need to talk. Tomorrow, in my office." "I am busy tomorrow," I said. "I am flying back." "You are staying," he ordered. "We have paperwork to discuss." I pulled my arm free. "No," I said. "We don't." I walked away. I didn't run. I didn't look back. I walked straight through the garden, past the fountain, past the bar, and out the gate. I didn't say goodbye to Mom. I didn't say goodbye to Tessa. I walked to the valet stand. "The blue sedan," I said. While I waited, I pulled out my phone. I sent a text to Noah. "I am leaving. You can go whenever you have what you need." A minute later, a reply came. "I have it. I got the look your dad gave you on the steps. It is lethal. Do you want me to soften the lighting and post-production? You look pretty intense." I typed back instantly. "No, no edits, no filters. I want the grain. I want the shadows. I want it to look exactly like it felt. Understood." Noah replied. The valet brought my car. I tipped him $20. I got in and drove away from the lights, the music, and the gold-plated lies of Indian Hill. I didn't stay for the cake. I didn't stay to hear them spin my speech into Allison being eccentric. I had come to be a mirror. And for 3 minutes on that stage, I had forced them to look at themselves. The terror in my father's eyes was the only souvenir I needed. I waited 3 days after the gala to detonate the bomb. I was back in Denver, safe behind the walls of my apartment and the firewall of my indifference. I went to work on Monday and Tuesday as if nothing had happened. I audited security logs. I drank my coffee. I slept in my own bed, which did not require a mortgage fraud application to maintain. On Wednesday evening, Noah sent me the link to the gallery. He had titled it simply, The Hall Gala. Raw. I opened the folder. There were 212 images. They were masterpieces of social horror. Noah hadn't just taken pictures. He had performed an autopsy with a lens. There was no retouching. The lighting wasn't softened to hide wrinkles or tension. The shadows were deep, and the grain gave everything a stark, journalistic quality, like photos from a crime scene investigation rather than a society fundraiser. I scrolled through them. There was the Unity photo. In color. On my mother's Facebook. It probably looked fine. A wide shot of a golden family with a pop of blue at the edge, but in Noah's black and white close-up. The story was different. He had focused on the gap between my mother's shoulder and my arm. It looked like a canyon. My mother was physically leaning away from me, her body torqued toward Bryce, while I stood straight, looking like a statue that had been placed on the set by mistake. There was a shot of the cocktail hour. My father was laughing with a donor, his hand gripping the man's shoulder, but Noah had caught the reflection in the mirror behind them. In the reflection, my father's eyes weren't laughing. They were scanning the room, tight with anxiety. And then there was the shot of the toast. I was at the microphone, my hand raised. The camera was positioned low, looking up at me, making me look tall, imposing, almost judicial. In the background, out of focus, but still recognizable, was my father. He wasn't looking at me with pride. He was looking at me with a mixture of terror and loathing, his hand half raised as if he wanted to cut the cord. It was the visual evidence of everything I had felt for a year. It was the proof that Unity was a brand name, not a reality. I selected 20 photos. I didn't pick the ones where people looked ugly or unflattering. I wasn't being petty. I picked the ones where the body language screamed the truth. The turned backs, the forced smiles, the isolation. I opened my email client. I typed in the recipients, Mom, Dad, Tessa, Bryce, Evan. Then I added the B list, Aunt Kathy, Uncle Steve, the cousins. I even added Mrs. Gable, the neighbor who had been squeezed into the Thanksgiving table instead of me. Subject: photos from the gala. Body: link, no text, no, hope you enjoy, no, look at these, just the data. I hit send. Then I poured myself a glass of wine and waited. The reaction time was faster than a stock market crash. 11 minutes later, my phone lit up. It was Tessa. Why did you send these? There were no emojis, no sparkles, no yellow hearts. For Tessa, a text without an emoji was the equivalent of a scream. There is one where Mom looks miserable. She texted again, a second later. And why are they all so dark? Why didn't you use the official photographer's link? People are going to see these. I didn't reply. Evan's client is on this chain. Allison, came a third text. Uncle Steve already replied asking if everything is okay because Dad looks like he's having a stroke in the toast picture. What are you doing? I took a sip of wine. I wasn't doing anything. I was just sharing memories. That is what families do, isn't it? We share photos. 20 minutes later, my father called. I let it go to voicemail. He called again immediately. I picked up on the third ring. I wanted him to be at peak velocity. Allison, he barked. He didn't say hello. His voice was trembling, not with sadness, but with the suppressed rage of a man whose control panel is flashing red. What the hell is this email? It is the photos from the party, I said calmly. Noah did a great job, didn't he? Very artistic. Artistic? He sputtered. It looks like a funeral. You are making us look disjointed. I have Aunt Kathy calling me, asking why you are standing 3 feet away from everyone in the group picture. She thinks we had a fight. We didn't have a fight. Dad, I said, you just didn't make room for me. Don't give me that metaphorical crap, he snapped. You sent this to everyone. Do you know who was on that list? Do you know who talks to whom in this town? You are shaming this family. Am I? I asked. Or am I just showing them the real face? You wanted me there. Dad, you wanted me in the picture. I gave you exactly what you asked for. I showed up. You are trying to sabotage us, he accused. You come in with that dress. You give that little speech about truth, and now this? After everything we have done for you? What have you done for me, Dad? I asked. Besides try to use my credit score? There was a silence on the line. It was a heavy, suffocating silence. He knew that I knew, but he couldn't admit it. Not on the phone, not when he was trying to maintain the high ground. You are ungrateful, he finally said, his voice dropping to a low growl. You are bitter because you are alone, and you want to drag us down with you. Take the link down. Tell everyone it was a wrong upload. Send the official photos. I can't take it down, Dad, I said. The internet is forever, just like family. I hung up. I felt a strange vibration in my chest. It wasn't fear. It was the adrenaline of finally standing my ground. For 35 years, I had been terrified of disappointing him. Now, I realized that his disappointment was just a weapon he used to keep me in line. And I had walked out of range. Half an hour later, a text came from Evan. Allison. Look, I don't get involved in the family drama usually, but one of the investors for Miller Co. was at the party. He is on the email chain because he is a cousin of Dad's. He just emailed me asking if the family stability is as solid as we pitched it. He saw the photos. He said the vibe looks fractured. Please, if you can just send a follow-up saying it was an artistic choice or something? I have a lot riding on this funding round. I read the text and felt a flicker of pity, quickly extinguished by reality. Evan was worried about his funding. He wasn't worried that his wife's sister had been erased from her own family. He was worried that the image of the happy family, the collateral for his loans, was cracking. I didn't reply to Evan. I wasn't their PR firm anymore. Then, the final call came. Mom, it was 9 o'clock in Denver, 11 o'clock in Cincinnati. I almost didn't answer. I knew what this would be. Dad was the hammer. Mom was the guilt. I answered. Allison? Her voice was wet. She had been crying, or she was doing a very good impression of it. Hi, Mom. Why do you hate us? She sobbed. It was such a direct, childish question that I almost laughed. I don't hate you, Mom. Then why are you doing this? She wept. I tried so hard. I planned the whole gala. I wanted everyone to be together. And you stood there like a stranger. And now these pictures, they make me look like a monster. I look like I'm turning my back on my own child. You were turning your back. Mom, I said gently. You have been turning your back for a year. That is not true, she insisted, her voice rising to a keen. We love you. We have always loved you. We gave you everything. Piano lessons, camp, college. She was listing receipts. She was tallying the investment to prove the affection. I know you love me in your way, I said. But you lied to me, Mom. You lied about Easter. I waited. This was the moment. The door was open. All she had to do was walk through it. All she had to do was say, yes, I lied. We were in trouble with the bank, and we panicked. I am sorry. If she said that, I might have stopped. I might have deleted the album. I might have flown back to Ohio to help them figure out a legal way out of their mess. The silence on the line stretched out. I could hear her breathing, hitching with tears. I don't know what you are talking about, she whispered. We wanted a quiet Easter. Why can't you let that go? Why do you have to punish me for being tired? She doubled down, even now, with the evidence staring her in the face, with her family image crumbling. She couldn't let go of the lie. The narrative was more important than the daughter. Okay, Mom, I said. My voice was empty. The last drop of hope had just evaporated. I believe you. You. You do? I believe that is what you believe, I said. Good night, Mom. I let the line go dead. I sat in my living room, surrounded by the silence I had curated. It was over. The emotional war was over. They had fired their last shots. Anger, guilt, shame, and I was still standing. I went to bed and slept deeply. 2 days later, on a Friday afternoon, the dominoes stopped falling emotionally and started falling legally. I was at my desk at Rivergate when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Area code 513, Cincinnati. I let it go to voicemail. I checked the transcript a minute later. Hello? This message is for, Allison Hall, or Marlene Hall. This is David Henderson from First National Bank. I am trying to reach the resident regarding the occupancy verification for the file ending in 459. We saw the update regarding the family gathering, and we just need to get that signature to finalize the modification before the rate lock expires on Monday. Please call me back at... I read the text transcript again. My blood ran cold. We saw the update regarding the family gathering. They had used the gala. They had likely sent the Family Unity newsletter or links to the official photos to the bank officer. They had used my physical presence at the party, my body in that dress, standing on that stage, as proof that I was back, proof that the additional occupant was indeed part of the household. They hadn't just invited me to save face with the neighbors. They had invited me to trick the bank. They were trying to use my attendance to push through the loan modification that had been stalled since last Easter. They were telling the bank, "See? She is here. She is part of the family. The residence issue is resolved." It was a mix of stupidity and desperation that was almost breathtaking. Did they think the bank wouldn't call me? Or did they put my number down on the form thinking they could intercept the call? Or talk me into signing it later? Or maybe the banker, Mr. Henderson, was confused. Maybe he called my number because it was on the old draft application Robert had found, and he assumed I was the one handling the paperwork. It didn't matter. What mattered was that they were still doing it. After the photos, after the phone calls, after everything. They were still trying to monetize me. I didn't call Mr. Henderson back. I saved the voicemail audio. I forwarded it to Robert Vance, my attorney. Then I typed a message to Robert. They are active. They are trying to close the loan using my presence at the gala as verification. We need to stop this now. Robert replied 4 minutes later. This is the trigger. Allison, this moves it from potential fraud to active attempt. We need to intervene before Monday. If that loan closes with your name attached in any capacity, unraveling it will take years. What do we do? I asked. We file a cease and desist, Robert wrote, and we notify the lender formally that you are not a resident. But given the timeline, the rate lock expires Monday, a letter might be too slow. We need to do this in person, or via a direct legal confrontation. I looked at the calendar. It was Friday. I couldn't just send a letter. They would ignore it. They would forge a signature. They were desperate. People who set a place for a dog while trying to refinance a house with their daughter's credit score are not rational actors. I needed to end this. Not with an email, not with a photo album. I needed to be in the room when the pen hit the paper. I picked up my phone and called Robert. Set it up, I said. Set what up? Robert asked. A meeting, I said. Monday morning, in Cincinnati, not at their house. I am not going back to that house. I want them to meet us. Us? I am coming with you, I said. I want them to look me in the eye when you put the papers on the table. I want to see them try to tell the lawyer that I wanted to be alone. Allison, that is going to be incredibly volatile, Robert warned. They will feel cornered. Good, I said. They should be. They have been cornering me for a year. Where do you want to meet? Do you have a partner firm in Cincinnati? Yes, downtown, 4th Street. Book a conference room, I said, and send the summons. Tell them it is regarding estate planning and asset verification. They will come running if they think there is money involved. or if they think I am finally capitulating. And if they ask why I am there, tell them I have retained counsel to assist with the family paperwork, I said. Let them think I am bringing a pen to sign. Let them think they won. You are playing a dangerous game, Allison. I am not playing, Robert, I said. I am finishing it. I ended it. I looked at the photo of my family one last time, the one Noah had taken. With the gap between us, I was about to close that gap, but not with love. I was going to close it with a subpoena. I booked my flight. One way. Monday morning was going to be the real family reunion. The conference room on the 16th floor of the building on 4th Street did not smell like vanilla or potpourri. The way my mother's living room did, it smelled of conditioned air and copier ink. It was a neutral zone, stripped of all sentimentality, which made it the perfect setting for the death of a family myth. My parents had suggested we meet at a quiet bistro in Hyde Park. They wanted neutral ground with soft lighting and heavy napkins. A place where social etiquette would prevent me from raising my voice. I had declined. We will meet at the offices of Vance and Associates, I had told my father. Monday morning, 9 o'clock. They arrived at 8:55. I was already seated at the long mahogany table, flanked by Robert Vance. I had chosen the seat facing the door. When they walked in, they had to cross the length of the room to get to me. It was a long walk. My father entered first, wearing his business casual armor, a blazer and pressed khakis. He looked irritated but controlled. The look of a man arriving at a meeting he felt was unnecessary but manageable. My mother followed. She was wearing a scarf I had bought her 3 Christmases ago. She looked pale. Her eyes darted to Robert, then to the paralegal taking notes in the corner, then to me. She didn't smile. And then, trailing behind them like a reluctant understudy, was Tessa. I hadn't invited Tessa. She walked in with a nervous, brittle energy, clutching a designer handbag as if it contained a weapon. She offered a tight, terrifyingly bright smile. "Hi, Al," she chirped, her voice echoing strangely in the acoustic stillness of the room. "Mom said we were having a family sit-down, so I thought I would come along. Moral support, right? We can just hit reset, make everything okay." Her eyes were not looking at me. They were glued to the stack of files in front of Robert. She wasn't afraid of losing her sister. She was afraid of what was in those folders. She was afraid that whatever was about to happen might splash onto her, staining her reputation or worse, her credit rating. "Please, sit down," Robert said. His voice was not warm, it was professional. They took the 3 chairs opposite us. The table was wide. It felt like a border crossing. "I don't see why we need lawyers for this," my father started, leaning back and crossing his arms. "Allison, this is ridiculous. We are family. If there is paperwork to sign for the house, we can handle it at home." "We are not here to sign paperwork for the house, Dad," I said. "At least, not the paperwork, you think." "Then why are we here?" Tessa asked, her voice shrill. Can we just apologize for the gala misunderstanding and move on? I know you were upset about the photos, but it is not about the photos, Tessa, I said. I nodded to Robert. He opened the first file. He didn't speak. He simply slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It was the transcript of the butt dial, time-stamped, verified. Marlene. "She is busy. She wanted to be alone." My mother looked at the paper. She didn't touch it. She stared at the words as if they were written in a foreign language she was terrified she understood. "We know," Robert said calmly. "We have the audio file. We know there was a dinner. We know the entire extended family was there. And we know Allison was explicitly excluded." "So?" my father blustered, though his face had reddened. "So we had a dinner. Is that a crime? We lied to spare her feelings. It was a social lie. You are going to sue us for being bad hosts?" "No," I said. "I am not suing you for being bad hosts. I am establishing the timeline." Robert slid the second document across. It was the transcript of the voicemail from Mr. Henderson at First National Bank. Received just 3 days ago. We saw the update regarding the family gathering. Need to get that signature to finalize the modification. Mr. Henderson seems to be under the impression that I am a resident of your home, I said, looking directly at my father. He seems to think that my presence at the gala was confirmation that the additional occupant listed on your loan application is, in fact, part of the household. The room went dead silent. Tessa gasped. It was a small, sharp sound. She looked at Dad. Dad? What loan? My father didn't look at her. He was staring at me with a look of pure, venomous shock. He hadn't realized I knew. He thought he was playing chess against a child, and he had just realized his queen was gone. You tried to use the gala, I said, my voice steady. You didn't invite me for unity. You invited me because you needed physical proof to show the bank that your fraudulent application was valid. You needed me in the photos so you could forward them to the loan officer and say, "Look, she is here. She lives here." That is not true, my mother whispered. But her voice had no air in it. It is true, I said. I leaned forward. I placed my hands flat on the table. I have one question, I said. And I want an answer, a real answer, not a story, not a spin. I looked at my mother. Easter morning, I said. When you called me and told me dinner was canceled, was there a dinner planned? Allison, please, she stammered, her eyes filling with tears. I meant that... No, I cut her off. The word cracked like a whip. Yes, or no. She froze. She looked at Dad for help, but he was looking at the table. She looked at Tessa, who was shrinking away from her. Yes, my mother choked out. And why wasn't I invited? I asked. Because we... She stopped. She couldn't say it. Because the appraiser was coming, my father interrupted. His voice was hard, stripped of all the fatherly warmth. He was cornered, and he decided to fight with the truth. The bank required an occupancy check within 30 days of the closing. If you had been there, if you had started talking about your apartment in Denver or your job at Rivergate, the loan would have been flagged. So you erased me, I said, to save the interest rate. We needed the money, he snapped. Do you have any idea what the overhead is on that house? Do you know how much we have helped Tessa? How much we have put into Bryce's career? We needed to restructure. We needed stability. And you? He pointed a shaking finger at me. You were the only one with a clean file. We were going to pay it back. It wasn't going to hurt you. It was identity theft, Robert Vance interjected smoothly. And mortgage fraud. We are family, Dad shouted. You help family. I help family, I said. I don't help people who set a place for a dog and tell me there is no room. Tessa put her head in her hands. Oh my God, she muttered. If this gets out? Evans investors. Exactly, I said. The image, that is all it ever is. I reached into my bag. I am not here to sign the loan. Dad, I said. I am not here to validate your fraud. I am here to give you this. I pulled out a thick document bound in blue paper. I slid it across the table. It stopped right in front of my father's hands. What is this? He asked. It is a revocable living trust, I said. I executed it this morning. Robert is the trustee. They looked at it, confused. It separates my assets from yours, I explained. Completely. It specifies that in the event of my death, or my incapacitation, my estate does not go to my next of kin. It goes to a specific list of charities. I watched the realization hit them. It also contains a strict disinheritance clause, Robert added. Greg Hall, Marlene Hall, Tessa Miller, and Bryce Hall are explicitly excluded from receiving any benefit, assets, or decision-making power regarding Allison's estate. Furthermore, Allison has revoked all previous powers of attorney. You cut us out? My mother whispered. She looked more horrified by this document than she had by the revelation of the fraud. I protected myself, I said. You see, Dad, you were right. I am the stable one. I have assets. I have a retirement fund. I have savings. And I realize that as long as I am legally connected to you, those assets are at risk because you view them as a backup plan for your own mistakes. Allison, this is extreme, Tessa said, looking terrified. You are acting like we are enemies. No, I said. I am acting like a bank that has realized the borrower is high risk. I am closing the account. My father stared at the document. You are trying to blackmail us, he said. You are going to hold this over our heads? You want money? Is that it? I don't want a penny from you, I said. I have enough money. What I want is freedom. I stood up. Here are the conditions, I said. I didn't look at a piece of paper. I knew them by heart. Robert has already drafted a letter to First National Bank. It states clearly that I do not live in Ohio. I am not a resident, and I am not a party to any loan. We are sending it at noon today. If you send that, the loan falls through, my father said, his face gray. They will call the note due. We could lose the house. That is not my problem, I said. That is a consequence of your actions. I suggest you sell the house. It is too big for two people anyway. And regarding the family, I continued, I am done being the prop. I will not attend the galas. I will not be in the Christmas card. I will not be the silent aunt who sends checks. You are divorcing us? Mom asked, her voice trembling. I am resigning, I said. I am resigning from the position of the convenient daughter. However, I added, looking at them, I am not vindictive. I am not posting the recording of the butt dial on the internet. I am not sending the fraud evidence to the district attorney. I am keeping that in Robert's safe. Why? Tessa asked. As insurance, I said. To ensure that you never, ever try to use my name again. I picked up my purse. There is one last thing, I said. If you ever want to speak to me again, not as a bank, but as a daughter, I want a letter, a real one, admitting what you did, admitting the lie about Easter, admitting the financial exploitation. Until I get that letter, do not call me. Allison, don't do this, my father said. He stood up, trying to use his height to intimidate me one last time. You are blowing this up. You are making a huge mistake. Don't make a big deal out of this. I looked him in the eye. I felt lighter than I had ever felt in my life. The gravity of their expectations was gone. I am not making it big, Dad, I said. I am just done playing small. I turned and walked to the door. Allison, my mother cried out. I didn't stop. I opened the heavy oak door. I walked out into the hallway. I heard Robert gathering the files behind me. I walked to the elevator and pressed the button. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I checked my watch. It was 9:20 in the morning. I had time to catch an earlier flight back to Denver. I walked out of the building and into the cold Cincinnati air. I took a deep breath. It tasted like winter, crisp and clean. I had lost a family. Yes, but I had saved myself. 3 weeks later, I sat in my lawyer's office in Denver to sign one final document. It wasn't a lawsuit. It was the charter for a foundation. I took $20,000 from my Freedom Fund, the money I had saved while they were ignoring me, and established a small scholarship. The Allison Hall Grant. The criteria were specific. It was for students who had established financial independence from their parents due to estrangement or lack of support. It was for the kids who had been erased from the table. It wasn't millions of dollars. It was enough to buy books, or pay rent for a semester, or just give someone a breathing room I never had. And then came Easter, 1 year to the day since the call that changed everything. I didn't spend it alone, and I didn't spend it in Ohio. I hosted a dinner in my apartment in Denver. I invited Noah, the photographer. I invited a few colleagues from Rivergate. I invited a neighbor I had started running with. The table was mismatched. The chairs were different heights. The food was a chaotic mix of potluck dishes, tacos, salad, a store-bought cake. There was no unity theme. There were no assigned seats. But as we sat down, and Noah uncorked a bottle of wine, and the laughter rose up. Real laughter. Not the polite, performative laughter of the gala. I looked around. I looked at the empty spot at the head of the table. I walked over to it. I pulled out the chair. I sat down. It wasn't a seat that someone had given me. It wasn't a seat that could be taken away if I didn't smile enough or earn enough. It was my seat. I had built the table, and for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I belonged. Thank you so much for listening to Allison's story. It is a hard journey to walk away from the people who are supposed to love you. But sometimes, standing up for yourself is the only way to find your real place in the world. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Are you in the kitchen like Allison? Or driving? Or maybe relaxing after a long day? Let me know in the comments below. I love seeing our community map grow. Please don't forget to subscribe to Nina Revenge Stories. Hit that like button if you enjoyed Allison's victory. And smash that hype button to help this story reach more people who might need to hear it. Stay strong, and see you in the next video.